The luxury sedan's engine died at the worst possible moment, on a deserted mountain road as night fell, leaving CEO Lena Whitmore utterly alone. No signal, no help, no control. The woman who commanded billion-dollar empires stood powerless against the wilderness until headlights appeared behind her, and a stranger's kindness unlocked a past she thought was buried forever. One breakdown, one mechanic, one night that would unravel 15 years of carefully constructed distance. If you're ready for a story about second chances, lost love, and the courage to choose what truly matters, stay with me until the end. And if this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this journey reaches across the world. The mountain highway stretched endlessly into darkness, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through wilderness that swallowed civilization whole. Lena Whitmore gripped the steering wheel of her Mercedes S-Class with the same commanding authority she brought to every boardroom, every negotiation, every conquest that had built her empire from nothing. The dashboard glowed with soft, amber light, the only companion in a world that had gone utterly black beyond her headlights. She'd left the investor summit 3 hours early, declining the after-dinner networking that lesser executives considered essential. Lena Whitmore didn't network. She acquired, she dominated, she closed deals that made competitors weep. The winding mountain route back to the city was longer but faster, cutting 2 hours off the interstate crawl. Time was money, and Lena had never wasted either. Her phone sat silent in the center console, its screen dark. No emails demanding immediate response. No board members questioning her decisions. No subordinates seeking approval they should have had the courage to claim themselves. Just silence and the mountain night, and Lena alone with thoughts she usually drowned in work. The engine stuttered. Lena's eyes flicked to the dashboard, searching for warning lights that hadn't appeared. Premium German engineering didn't fail. She'd paid enough to ensure that much. The stuttering smoothed out, and she pressed the accelerator with renewed confidence. Then the entire car died. No dramatic explosion, no grinding metal or burning smell, just sudden, absolute silence as every system shut down simultaneously. The headlights vanished, plunging the road into darkness so complete it felt solid. The dashboard went black. Even the gentle hum of climate control ceased, leaving only the sound of Lena's breathing and her heart suddenly pounding against her ribs. The Mercedes coasted on momentum alone, and Lena's executive instincts kicked in immediately. She guided the powerless vehicle toward the shoulder, feeling for the road's edge in near total darkness. The car rolled to a stop at an awkward angle, 2 wheels on gravel, 2 still on asphalt. For 10 seconds, Lena sat motionless, waiting for the systems to reboot, for German engineering to correct whatever anomaly had occurred. Nothing happened. The silence pressed against her ears like physical weight. "Unacceptable," she said aloud, her voice sharp in the darkness. She reached for her phone, thumb already composing the message to her assistant. Arrange immediate roadside service, contact the dealership's executive line, ensure a replacement vehicle within the hour. No signal. Lena stared at the screen, watching the single word mock her authority. No service. She held the phone higher, turning it toward different angles, as if commanding the universe to obey. The message didn't change. She tried the car's ignition. Nothing. No click, no attempt to turn over, no response whatsoever. She tried again, holding the button longer, as if force of will could resurrect the dead engine. Still nothing. The mountain night had gone from peaceful to threatening in the span of heartbeats. Lena became acutely aware of how completely alone she was. No other headlights had passed in either direction for at least 20 minutes. No houses dotted these slopes. No gas stations or rest stops interrupted the wilderness. Just trees and darkness and a disabled luxury car that suddenly felt more like an expensive coffin than a symbol of success. She stepped out of the vehicle, and the October cold hit her like a slap. Her designer suit, perfect for climate-controlled conference rooms, offered no protection against mountain air that had already forgotten summer existed. The heels that made her tower over male executives clicked uselessly on gravel, completely wrong for terrain that demanded practical footwear she'd never owned. Lena pulled out her phone again, holding it above her head, walking in small circles like some kind of signal-seeking ritual. Nothing. The device that connected her to global markets, to her executive team, to her entire empire, had become a useless rectangle of metal and glass. "Think," she commanded herself, the word crisp and executive. She'd built a company from a college dorm room. She'd survived hostile takeovers and market crashes. She'd stared down competitors twice her age and 3 times her resources. A broken car on a mountain road was just another problem requiring systematic solution. Except she had no tools, no mechanical knowledge, no way to call for help. And darkness so complete it felt like the world itself had ended just beyond her headlights' former reach. The sound of an engine made her spin toward the road. Headlights appeared around the curve behind her, and relief flooded through Lena's chest so powerfully it almost hurt. She stepped toward the road, one hand raised, grateful she'd left her hazard lights. No, wait. The hazard lights were dead too. Everything was dead. The approaching vehicle slowed. Not a luxury car or even a modern sedan, but an old pickup truck. Its paint faded to uncertain color in the darkness, its engine rattling with the distinctive sound of machinery held together by expertise and determination rather than factory precision. The truck pulled onto the shoulder behind her Mercedes, and Lena felt a spike of anxiety she usually reserved for hostile negotiations. Out here, alone, with no weapon except her phone and no signal to call for help, she was utterly vulnerable in ways her wealth couldn't protect against. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. He wore jeans and a work jacket, clothes chosen for function rather than impression. His face remained shadowed as he approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "Evening," he said, his voice quiet and warm. "Looks like you're having some trouble." Lena's executive mask snapped into place automatically. "My car died. Completely. Everything shut down at once." That's unusual for a Mercedes. He gestured toward her vehicle. "Mind if I take a look?" Every instinct screamed caution. He was a stranger. She was alone. This was exactly the scenario her assistant had warned her about when Lena insisted on driving herself through mountain wilderness at night. But what choice did she have? Walk 30 miles in heels? Wait until hypothermia set in? Hope another vehicle eventually passed? "Please," Lena said, hating how the word revealed her vulnerability. The man moved to her car with purposeful efficiency, pulling a flashlight from his jacket pocket. He popped the hood, somehow knowing exactly where the release was despite the dead electrical system, and studied the engine with the focused attention of genuine expertise. Lena watched him work, grateful for the flashlight's beam that pushed back the darkness slightly. In its reflected glow, she could see his face properly for the first time. Weathered but handsome, with the kind of strong features that looked better with age. His hands moved with practiced confidence, checking connections, testing components, reading the engine like other men read spreadsheets. "Your battery terminal's completely corroded," he said after a few minutes. "Probably been slowly failing for weeks. Just finally gave up tonight." "Can you fix it?" He glanced at her, and something in his expression suggested amusement at her expectation of immediate solutions. "I can get you running again, yeah. Just need to clean the terminals and reset the connection." He returned to his truck, rummaging in a toolbox that looked older than Lena's entire company. When he came back, he carried a wire brush and work gloves, approaching the repair with the calm efficiency of someone who'd solved similar problems hundreds of times. Lena stood awkwardly nearby, feeling useless in ways she hadn't experienced since childhood. In her world, she directed others to solve problems. She made calls, sent emails, delegated tasks to specialists. Actually fixing something with her own hands was completely foreign territory. "I'm Jack, by the way," the man said without looking up from his work. "Jack Miller." Lena. She almost added her last name, then stopped. Out here, in the darkness, with grease under his fingernails and genuine skill in his hands, her identity as CEO of Whitmore Technologies seemed absurdly irrelevant. "Well, Lena, you picked about the worst spot to break down. No cell signal for another 20 miles in either direction. You're lucky I came through when I did." "Very lucky," she agreed, meaning it completely. They fell into silence while Jack worked. Lena watched his hands move with practiced precision, cleaning corrosion she hadn't known existed, restoring connections between components she couldn't name. There was something almost meditative about his focus, a quality of complete presence she rarely encountered in her world of multitasking executives who wore their scattered attention like badges of importance. Try it now, Jack said finally, stepping back from the engine. Lena slid into the driver's seat and pressed the ignition. The engine turned over immediately, smooth and powerful, as if the breakdown had never occurred. The dashboard blazed to life. The headlights pushed back the darkness. Even the climate control resumed its gentle hum. Relief washed through her so powerfully it felt like physical warmth. She stepped out of the car, facing Jack with gratitude she rarely felt toward anyone. "Thank you," she said. "Seriously, you may have saved my life out here." Jack shrugged, wiping his hands on a rag from his pocket. "Just needed clean terminals. Preventive maintenance would have caught it before tonight." "How much do I owe you?" He looked genuinely confused by the question. "Nothing. It was 5 minutes with a wire brush." Lena reached for her purse, pulling out her wallet. She extracted several $100 bills, more than any mechanic would charge for such simple work, but appropriate payment for someone who'd appeared out of nowhere to rescue her from genuine danger. "Please," she said, holding out the money. "You spent your time, you used your tools, you stopped to help a stranger. Let me pay you." Jack's expression shifted to something that looked like disappointment, though Lena couldn't understand why. "I don't want your money." "Everyone wants money. Not for helping someone who needs it." He said it simply, as if the concept required no further explanation. Lena stood with cash in her outstretched hand, completely uncertain how to proceed. In her world, every transaction had a price. Every favor carried implied obligation. The idea of someone genuinely refusing payment for services rendered was so foreign it felt like a different language. "At least let me buy you dinner," she tried. "Or send a gift card or something. There has to be a way to thank you properly." Jack smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. Warmth radiated from that smile, genuine and unguarded in ways Lena hadn't experienced in years. "You just did thank me. That's enough." He turned back toward his truck, and Lena felt sudden panic at the idea of him leaving. Not because she feared another breakdown, though that was legitimate concern, but because something about this stranger's presence made her feel safe in ways that had nothing to do with mechanical repairs. "Wait," she called out. "What if it breaks down again? Can I at least get your number, in case I need a mechanic?" Jack paused at his truck's door, considering. Then he pulled a business card from his wallet, walking back to hand it to her. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Lena felt a spark of connection that had nothing to do with corroded battery terminals. "Miller's Auto Repair," the card read, with an address in a town called Pine Ridge and a phone number printed below. No website, no email, just simple contact information suggesting a business built on reputation rather than marketing. "Pine Ridge is about 40 miles west," Jack said. "If you have any more trouble, stop by, or any mechanic can handle basic maintenance." "Thank you," Lena said again, holding the card like it was precious. "Really, I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped." "Probably would have been fine," Jack said easily. "Someone else would have come along eventually." But they both knew that wasn't certain. Out here, in wilderness that swallowed human presence whole, eventually could mean hours, could mean hypothermia, could mean real danger instead of just inconvenience. Jack climbed into his truck, the engine rattling to life with familiar roughness. He gave her a small wave through the window, then pulled back onto the highway, his taillights disappearing around the curve within seconds. Lena stood beside her restored Mercedes, watching the darkness swallow her rescuer whole. She looked down at the business card still in her hand, running her thumb across the embossed lettering. Then she heard it. His voice. That particular cadence when he'd said her name. The warm tone that made Lena sound like music instead of just syllables. Her heart stopped. She knew that voice. She'd heard it before, years ago, in a completely different context. The memory hit her like physical impact, so powerful she actually staggered against her car for support. College. Freshman year. The party where everything changed. She'd been nobody then, scholarship student from nowhere, brilliant with code but clueless about everything else. The senior who'd cornered her in a dark hallway, drunk and aggressive, hands where they had no right to be. Her protests ignored, her fear rising toward genuine terror. Then another voice had cut through the chaos, calm and firm and absolutely unyielding. She said no, back off. The senior had turned, ready to fight, then reconsidered when he saw the man who'd spoken, someone who moved with quiet confidence, who didn't need to threaten because his presence alone commanded respect. Jack. It had been Jack. He'd walked her back to her dorm that night, listened to her shaking explanations, made sure she got inside safely, asked if she wanted to report what happened, respected her decision when she'd been too terrified to make waves. Then he'd become more than her rescuer. He'd become her friend, her study partner. The person she talked to when the pressure of being poor and brilliant in a school full of wealthy mediocrity became overwhelming. He'd become the first person she'd ever truly loved. They'd spent 6 months together that freshman year, 6 months of late-night conversations about dreams and fears and futures, 6 months of studying together in the library, of stolen kisses behind the computer science building, of planning a life where they'd change the world together. Then he'd disappeared. No explanation. No goodbye. He'd simply stopped showing up to their meeting spots, stopped answering calls, stopped existing in her life as completely as if he'd never been there at all. Lena had spent weeks searching for answers. His roommate claimed he'd left school. His few other friends had no information. It was as if Jack had been erased from existence, leaving only the hollow ache of abandonment in his wake. She'd buried that pain under ambition, channeled heartbreak into building something no one could take away, become someone powerful enough that abandonment could never hurt her again. And now, 15 years later, he'd reappeared on a dark mountain road, fixed her car, smiled at her with that same warmth that had once made her believe in happy endings. And he hadn't recognized her. The realization hurt more than Lena wanted to admit. She'd changed, certainly. The scholarship student had become a CEO. The uncertain girl had become a woman who commanded respect through sheer force of competence. But had she changed so much that the man who'd once known her better than anyone could look directly at her and see a complete stranger? Or had she simply never mattered to him the way he'd mattered to her? Lena climbed back into her Mercedes, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped the wheel. The business card sat on the passenger seat, innocuous and devastating all at once. She should drive away, return to her life, her company, her carefully constructed world where feelings were liabilities and control was everything. Jack Miller was clearly living his own life now, in a small town 40 miles from anywhere that mattered, content with his auto repair shop and his simple existence. Their paths had crossed by accident. By the time she reached the city, this entire encounter would feel like a dream, strange and surreal and ultimately meaningless. That's what she should do. Instead, Lana picked up the business card and typed the address into her phone's GPS. Pine Ridge. 40 miles west. Miller's Auto Repair. The drive back to the city would take her east. Returning to her life meant turning right when she reached the highway. Lena sat at the dark roadside, engine idling, her entire future balanced on a simple directional choice. Then she turned left. The town of Pine Ridge appeared almost reluctantly from the wilderness, as if the mountains themselves were hesitant to acknowledge human settlement. It wasn't charming in the manufactured way of tourist destinations, with their carefully preserved historical facades and artisan coffee shops. This was a working town, built for logging and mining in another era, now sustained by the small businesses that served people who'd chosen wilderness over convenience. Main Street consisted of perhaps 20 buildings total, a hardware store, a diner with 1970s-era signage, a post office, a general store that probably hadn't updated its inventory since the Reagan administration. And there, at the far end where pavement gave way to gravel, sat Miller's Auto Repair. The shop was dark at this hour, closed for the night. A single security light illuminated the parking area, revealing 2 garage bays and a small office attached to the front. Several vehicles in various states of repair sat in the side lot, ordinary cars and trucks belonging to ordinary people. Nothing like the luxury imports that populated the dealership service centers Lena normally frequented. She parked across the street, keeping her Mercedes in shadow, feeling ridiculous and reckless, and completely unable to stop herself. What was she doing here? What did she hope to accomplish? Jack hadn't recognized her. He'd helped a stranded motorist and gone home to whatever life he'd built in the 15 years since abandoning her without explanation. The smart move was to drive away. Right now. Before this impulse became something she'd regret. Movement caught her eye. A door opened at the side of the building, Not the shop's front entrance, but what looked like residential access. Jack emerged, his work jacket replaced by a simple flannel shirt, his posture relaxed in the way of a man finished with the day's obligations. But he wasn't alone. A small figure followed him out. A girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, with dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail and her father's warm smile. She was talking animatedly about something, her hands moving in enthusiastic gestures, and Jack listened with the kind of complete attention that Lena recognized from their college days. They walked toward the parking lot, and Lena sank lower in her seat instinctively, feeling like a stalker, which she was. This was absolutely stalker behavior. Jack opened the passenger door of an older Toyota parked near the shop, and the girl climbed in, still chattering. He said something that made her laugh, the sound carrying clearly through the quiet night, then closed her door and walked around to the driver's side. The Toyota's engine started and Jack pulled out of the lot, turning away from Lena's position. She watched the taillights disappear down a side street, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. Jack had a daughter, a child who clearly adored him, who trusted him completely, who had the kind of easy relationship with her father that spoke of genuine love rather than obligation. Of course he did. 15 years was more than enough time to build an entire life. To get married, have children, establish roots in a community, to become someone completely different from the college student who'd once promised Lena they'd change the world together. She'd been a fool to come here, a fool to imagine that one chance encounter on a mountain road meant anything more than simple coincidence. Jack Miller had moved on so completely, he didn't even remember the girl he'd once claimed to love. Lena started her engine, ready to end this ridiculous detour and return to her actual life. Then she saw the light come on in the building behind the auto shop. It wasn't Jack's shop itself, but the small house attached to the rear of the property. Through a window, Lena could see movement, Jack helping his daughter with something, their silhouettes warm and domestic against closed curtains. He lived here. Above his shop, or behind it, in the same building where he worked. No separation between professional and personal life. No pristine suburban home in a different neighborhood. Just seamless integration of work and family in a way that seemed impossibly foreign to Lena's carefully compartmentalized existence. She should leave. She'd satisfied her curiosity. Jack was alive, apparently well, raising a daughter in a small town where he fixed cars and lived simply. Their brief connection 15 years ago had meant nothing lasting, and tonight's encounter was just random chance that would fade into memory by morning. But Lena didn't start driving. Instead, she pulled out her phone and opened the search engine, typing Miller's Auto Repair Pine Ridge with fingers that trembled slightly. The shop's website was basic, clearly built using a free template, featuring exactly 3 pages: services, hours, and contact. No blog, no social media links, no marketing copy about customer satisfaction or quality guarantees. But there were reviews, dozens of them, all glowing. Jack saved me $2,000 by fixing what the dealership said needed replacing. Honest mechanic who actually explains what's wrong instead of just handing you a huge bill. My daughter's car broke down 60 miles away at midnight. Jack drove out there himself to tow her home safely. Refused payment. This man is a saint. Single-handedly keeps half this town's vehicles running. We'd be stranded without Millers. The reviews painted a picture of someone who'd become essential to his community. Someone people trusted not just with their cars, but with their safety, their finances, their family members who broke down in dangerous situations. Someone who helped strangers on dark mountain roads and refused payment because basic human decency didn't carry a price tag. Lena's throat felt tight. This was who Jack had become. Not the ambitious college student who'd talked about changing the world, but a small-town mechanic who changed individual lives through simple competence and genuine kindness. She didn't know whether to feel proud or heartbroken that he'd found this life without her. A knock on her window made Lena jump so violently she nearly dropped her phone. Jack stood outside her car, his expression confused but not unfriendly. Behind him, the door to his residence stood open, warm light spilling into the darkness. Lena rolled down her window, her heart pounding. I'm sorry. This isn't... You followed me, Jack said simply. Not accusatory, just stating fact. My car, Lena said desperately. It was making a weird noise. I wanted to make sure the repair held. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to. Jack studied her face for a long moment, and Lena felt certain he could see straight through her pathetic lie. Then his expression shifted to something that looked almost like recognition, though not quite focused. "Do I know you?" he asked quietly. "There's something familiar." Lena's breath caught. "We met tonight, on the mountain road." "No, I mean from before tonight. Have we met somewhere else?" This was the moment. She could tell him the truth, could say the name she'd used back in college, Lena Hartley, before she'd taken her mother's maiden name Whitmore to separate her business identity from her impoverished past. Could watch his face as memory returned as he realized the scholarship student he'd abandoned had become the powerful CEO who'd nearly frozen to death on a mountain because of corroded battery terminals. But what would that accomplish? What good came from forcing him to remember someone he'd clearly forgotten? "I don't think so," Lena said. "I just have one of those faces." The lie tasted bitter, but it was safer than truth. Jack nodded slowly, though his expression suggested he didn't quite believe her. "The noise your car was making, what did it sound like?" "Oh, it's fine now. Probably just my imagination. I should go." "It's late," Jack said. "And the next town is 40 miles east. There's a diner just down the street that serves decent coffee and even better pie. Why don't you at least warm up before driving back to wherever you're going?" It was a kind offer, nothing more. The same courtesy he'd probably extend to any stranger who seemed uncertain in his town at night. Lena should decline, should drive away and let this chance encounter fade into a strange footnote in both their lives. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Coffee sounds good." Jack's smile returned, warm and genuine. "Give me 2 minutes to let my daughter know I'm stepping out. She's old enough to stay alone for short periods, but I like to tell her when I'm leaving the property." He jogged back to his residence, disappearing inside briefly. Lena watched through the window as he spoke to his daughter, saw the girl nod, saw Jack ruffle her hair affectionately before returning outside. "All set," he said, gesturing down the street. "The diner's close enough to walk if you're comfortable leaving your car." They fell into step together, walking through the quiet town under stars so brilliant they looked fake. The October cold had deepened, and Lena shivered in her inadequate suit jacket. Jack noticed immediately. Without comment, he shrugged out of his flannel shirt and draped it over her shoulders. He wore a thermal undershirt beneath, apparently unfazed by the cold that had Lena's teeth chattering. "Thank you," she managed. "Can't have you freezing to death after I went to the trouble of fixing your car." The flannel smelled like motor oil and something else, a scent that triggered memories so powerful Lena nearly stumbled. This was how Jack had smelled in college. Not expensive cologne or designer fragrances, just honest work and the particular warmth of his presence. The diner was exactly what its exterior promised: vinyl booths, laminate tables, a long counter with rotating stools, and absolutely zero concessions to modern aesthetics. But it was warm and brightly lit, and the smell of fresh coffee made Lena's exhaustion suddenly overwhelming. They slid into a corner booth, and a waitress appeared immediately with menus and coffee without being asked. "Hey, Jack," she said warmly. "Late night for you." "Just helping a stranded motorist, Mary. This is Lena. Her car broke down on the mountain highway." Mary's eyes widened. "That's dangerous this time of year. Good thing Jack found you. The man's got a sixth sense for people who need rescuing." She turned to Lena with a knowing smile. "He's the town hero, you know. Saved just about everyone here at one point or another." "I'm starting to realize that," Lena said softly. They ordered coffee and apple pie, because Mary insisted the pie was still warm and refusing would be offensive. When the waitress left, silence settled between them, not quite comfortable, but not entirely awkward either. "So," Jack said finally, "what brings a woman in a Mercedes through mountain wilderness at night? You don't strike me as someone who takes scenic routes for the view." Lena wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, grateful for its warmth. "Business. An investor summit. I left early. Important work? Technology, software development." She kept it vague, unwilling to reveal the scope of her success. "And you? How long have you had the repair shop?" "About 12 years now. Came back to Pine Ridge after—" He paused, something crossing his face that looked like old pain. "After some things changed. Started the business, built it slowly. It's good work." Different from what you planned. The words escaped before Lena could stop them. Jack's eyes sharpened. How would you know what I planned? She'd made a mistake, revealed knowledge she shouldn't possess. Lena scrambled for recovery. I just mean, you seem like someone who's good with your hands, but you also seem educated. I figured you probably had other options. It was weak, but Jack appeared to accept it. I had plans once, he admitted. College. Big dreams about changing the world. But life doesn't always follow the script you write for it. What happened? The question was too direct, too personal. They were strangers, supposedly. But something in the quiet diner, in the warm coffee and the late hour, made confession feel natural. My mom got sick, Jack said quietly. Really sick. I was halfway through sophomore year when she was diagnosed. Stage 4 cancer, already metastasized. The doctors gave her maybe 6 months. Lena's chest tightened. I'm sorry. I dropped out to take care of her, came back here where she'd lived her whole life, where the cost of living was manageable, used up all our savings on treatments that didn't work. His voice remained steady, but Lena could hear the weight beneath the calm. She lasted 14 months, longer than anyone expected. I got to be with her at the end. That mattered. And you never went back to school. Couldn't afford it. Between medical bills and basic survival, I was broke. Plus I had... He stopped abruptly. Had what? Jack looked at her, and in his eyes Lena saw the same pain she'd carried for 15 years. Someone I left behind. Someone I cared about more than I probably knew how to express back then. Walking away from her was the hardest thing I ever did. The coffee cup trembled in Lena's hands. Why didn't you explain? Why just disappear? How did you... Jack caught himself, studying her face with new intensity. You really do seem familiar. Are you sure we haven't met? This was it, the moment where truth became inevitable. Lena opened her mouth, ready to confess everything. Then Jack's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and winced. I'm sorry, it's my daughter. I need to take this. Of course. Jack stepped outside, and through the diner's window, Lena watched him pace while talking, his expression shifting to concern. The conversation was brief, and when he returned, apology was written across his face. I have to go. Sophie's not feeling well, probably just anxiety. She gets nervous when I'm gone after dark, but I need to check on her. Absolutely. Go. Jack threw cash on the table, too much for coffee and pie, and started for the door. Then he turned back. I don't know why, he said slowly, but I feel like I should know you. Like there's something I'm forgetting that matters. Am I crazy? Lena's heart was breaking and soaring simultaneously. You're not crazy. Will you be in town tomorrow? She should say no, should end this before it became complicated. I could be? Come by the shop, around noon, after the morning rush. We can, I don't know, talk, figure out why I feel like I'm missing something important. Then he was gone, jogging back toward his daughter, leaving Lena alone in the diner with cold coffee and questions that had no safe answers. Mary appeared with a fresh pot. More coffee, honey. Please. The waitress poured, then lingered. Jack's a good man, one of the best, but he's been alone a long time, ever since his wife passed. Lena's world tilted. His wife? Sophie's mother, died when the girl was just 2 years old. Cancer, same as Jack's mother. He's raised that child alone for 8 years, working himself to exhaustion to give her a good life. Oh, Mary's expression was kind but knowing. I'm not sure what brought you to Pine Ridge, but if you're thinking of getting involved with Jack Miller, you should know. He's not just a man. He's a package deal. That little girl is his whole world. We're not. Sure, honey, just happened to follow him to his town and agree to coffee at 10:30 at night. Totally innocent. Lena couldn't help but smile despite everything. It's complicated. The good ones always are, Mary patted her shoulder. Jack deserves happiness. So does Sophie. Just make sure you're ready for what that means before you stir up his life. After Mary left, Lena sat alone in the empty diner, staring at her reflection in the dark window. The powerful CEO looked small and uncertain, wearing a borrowed flannel shirt in a town that didn't care about her empire. Tomorrow she'd go to the shop. She'd talk to Jack. She'd figure out whether the connection she felt was real or just nostalgia for a past that had never truly existed. and she'd decide whether Lena Whitmore, self-made millionaire, corporate titan, woman who'd built walls around her heart tall enough to touch the sky, was brave enough to risk everything for a second chance at the only thing money couldn't buy. Love. Real, messy, complicated love. The kind that terrified her more than any boardroom ever had. Lena didn't sleep that night. She checked into the only motel Pine Ridge offered, a single-story building with 12 rooms and a neon vacancy sign that flickered like a dying heartbeat. The room smelled faintly of pine cleaner and decades of transient lives, its decor frozen somewhere in the early 90s. None of it mattered. She lay on top of the scratchy comforter, still wearing Jack's flannel shirt, staring at the water-stained ceiling while her mind replayed 15 years of memories she'd thought were safely buried. His wife had died. He'd raised his daughter alone. He'd lost his mother, lost his education, lost everything he'd planned for his future, and somehow still became the kind of man an entire town relied on for help. And Lena had spent those same 15 years convinced he'd abandoned her because she hadn't mattered enough. The truth was so much more complicated and infinitely more painful. At 6 a.m, she gave up pretending sleep would come. She showered in the tiny bathroom with its rust-stained fixtures, then faced the reality that she had nothing to wear except yesterday's business suit. The designer outfit that had commanded respect in boardrooms looked absurd in a mountain town where practical flannel outranked Italian wool. The general store opened at 7. Lena walked there through morning mist that turned the town ghostly, her heels clicking against empty sidewalks. Inside, she found exactly what she expected. Work clothes built for function, nothing fashionable, everything durable. She bought jeans, a simple sweater, boots that actually gripped terrain instead of decorating it. The teenager at the register didn't ask why a woman in $1,000 heels was buying $60 worth of practical clothing. Small towns understood that everyone had their reasons. Back at the motel, Lena changed into her new outfit and stared at her reflection. Without the armor of executive fashion, she looked younger. More like the girl Jack had known in college. More vulnerable in ways that terrified her. She spent the morning in the motel room, laptop open, attempting to work. Her assistant had sent 17 emails overnight, each flagged urgent. Board members wanted updates on the investor summit. Her CFO needed approval on the quarterly projections. 2 different department heads were fighting over budget allocations. Lena read every message and answered none of them. Her empire was running exactly as designed, efficient, profitable, entirely capable of surviving without her constant intervention. The realization should have felt satisfying. Instead, it felt hollow. At 11:30, she walked back to Miller's Auto Repair. The shop was busy in full daylight. Both garage bays were occupied, one with a truck on a lift, another with a sedan getting an oil change. Jack moved between them with practiced efficiency, his hands black with grease, his focus absolute. He wore the same clothes from last night, suggesting he'd worked through to morning without pause. Lena stood at the edge of the parking lot, suddenly uncertain. This was his world, his life. She had no right to disrupt it with confessions about a past he'd been forced to leave behind. Jack looked up from the engine he was examining, and his eyes found her immediately. The smile that crossed his face was genuine, if tired. He said something to the young mechanic working beside him, then wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward her. "You came," he said. "You asked me to." "I wasn't sure you would." He gestured toward the small office attached to the garage. "Give me 5 minutes to finish up with Mrs. Patterson's transmission, then we can talk?" "Take your time." But Lena didn't wait in the office. Instead, she watched Jack work, fascinated by the competence in every movement. He explained something to the elderly woman who owned the sedan, his tone patient and free of condescension as he showed her the worn parts that needed replacing. When she worried about the cost, Jack offered a payment plan without making it feel like charity. The woman left smiling, trusting completely that she'd been treated fairly. This happened 3 more times in the next hour. People brought Jack their problems, mechanical and otherwise, and he solved them with quiet competence that never demanded gratitude or recognition. A young mother whose toddler was fussing in the back seat. An elderly man who clearly just wanted someone to talk to while his oil was changed. A teenager with a failing alternator and no money to fix it properly. Jack helped them all. He charged fair prices, offered honest assessments, and treated every person with the same respect regardless of their bank account or social status. Lena felt something crack open inside her chest. This was what changing the world actually looked like. Not billion-dollar valuations or revolutionary software. Just one person helping another, consistently and without fanfare, until an entire community was held together by simple kindness. "Sorry about the wait," Jack said finally, appearing at her elbow. He'd washed his hands, but grease still lined his fingernails. "Tuesdays are always busy. Everyone needs their cars running before the week really gets going." "You're good at this," Lena said. "Not just the mechanical work, the people part." Jack shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "It's just cars." "It's not just cars. You made that woman feel safe. You gave that kid hope. You're doing exactly what you said you'd do in college, helping people." Something shifted in Jack's expression. "How do you know what I said in college?" The moment had arrived. No more evasion, no more half-truths. "Because I knew you then," Lena said quietly. "My name is Lena, but back then I went by Lena Hartley." She watched recognition dawn slowly across his face. Confusion first, then disbelief. Then something that looked like he'd been punched in the chest. His eyes widened, scanning her features with new understanding, seeing past the executive polish to the girl underneath. "Elena," he breathed. He'd been the only person who called her that, her full name, spoken with tenderness that made it sound like poetry. "Oh my God, Elena. I go by Lena now." "I didn't. You look—" Jack ran a hand through his hair, his composure completely shattered. "How did I not recognize you?" "I've changed." "Not that much. I should have—" He shook his head. "The car breaking down. That wasn't coincidence, was it? You knew where to find me?" "No, the breakdown was real. But yes, I came to Pine Ridge deliberately. After you drove away last night, I realized who you were. I had to know—" Her voice cracked. "I had to know why you disappeared." Jack's face was a landscape of emotion, shock, and regret, and something deeper that Lena couldn't name. "Come with me," he said roughly. "Not here. Somewhere we can actually talk." He led her behind the shop, past the residential entrance, to a small garden that someone had clearly tended with care. Raised beds full of herbs, a wooden bench weathered by mountain winters, wind chimes hanging from a pergola that provided summer shade. It was peaceful and unexpected, hidden from the shop's commercial noise. They sat on the bench, not touching, the space between them charged with 15 years of unspoken words. "I looked for you," Lena said, "after you left. I went to your dorm, talked to your roommate, asked everyone who knew you. No one could tell me where you'd gone or why. It was like you'd been erased." "I'm sorry." Jack's voice was rough. "God, Elena, Lena, I'm so sorry. I wanted to call, to explain. But what could I say? My mom is dying, I'm broke, I'm dropping out of school to move back to a town you've never heard of. How could I ask you to understand that? You could have trusted me to try. You were 19 years old with your whole future ahead of you. Brilliant, ambitious, on track to do exactly what you'd planned. I wasn't going to drag you into my disaster. So you just vanished. Let me think you'd stopped caring. Let me believe I wasn't worth an explanation." Jack turned to face her fully, and the pain in his eyes was raw. "I cared so much it terrified me. You were everything, Lena. Everything I wanted, everything I believed in. Leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I was coming back to watch my mother die slowly while I worked minimum wage jobs trying to afford her medication. What kind of future was that to offer someone? The kind where we were together. You would have sacrificed everything, your education, your dreams, your potential. And for what? To watch me fall apart while I lost the only family I had left?" He shook his head. "I loved you too much to do that to you." The confession hung between them, simple and devastating. "You loved me," Lena repeated, past tense. Jack's expression became complicated. "I never stopped. I just convinced myself it didn't matter anymore." Lena felt tears threatening and forced them back through sheer will. She hadn't cried in 10 years. She wasn't going to start now, not when she needed to stay strong. "Tell me what happened," she said. "After you left school. All of it." So Jack told her. He spoke quietly, his eyes on the herb garden, recounting years of struggle with the same matter-of-fact tone he'd used to explain transmission repairs. His mother's illness, brutal and efficient. The medical bills that devoured every dollar he earned. The way he'd learned auto repair through desperation, working for a shop owner willing to teach in exchange for labor. She died 2 years after I came home, Jack said. I was 21, completely alone, and about $60,000 in debt. The shop owner who'd trained me was retiring and offered to sell me the business. I had no money, terrible credit, and absolutely no reason to believe I could make it work. But you did. I got a loan from a local bank that probably shouldn't have approved it. Worked 80-hour weeks for 3 years straight. Built a reputation one honest repair at a time. He paused. And I tried to forget about you. Tried to convince myself the chapter was closed. Did it work? No, you were in everything I did. Every customer I helped, I thought about how you'd encouraged me to care about people. Every time I had to make a hard decision, I asked myself what you would say. You weren't here, but you shaped everything anyway. Lena's chest felt tight. You got married. Jack's expression went distant. Her name was Sarah. She was a teacher, kind and patient. We met at a community event. She knew from the beginning that she wasn't my first choice, that there was someone I'd loved before her. But she married me anyway, said she could live with being second if I was honest about it. That's heartbreaking. It was, for both of us. I tried to love her the way she deserved. We had Sophie, and Sarah was an incredible mother. Then she got sick. His voice caught. Same type of cancer that killed my mom. Same prognosis. Same terrible countdown. Jack, I'm so sorry. She lasted longer than the doctors predicted. Almost 3 years from diagnosis to the end. Sophie was 2 when Sarah died. Too young to remember her mother, which breaks my heart in ways I can't explain. He looked at Lena directly. I've spent 8 years raising Sophie alone, trying to be enough for a daughter who deserves 2 parents. Some days I manage it. Some days I fall short. But she's everything to me. The only good thing I didn't mess up. The weight of his life was staggering. So much loss, so much responsibility, so much solitary struggle. And through it all, he'd become someone who helped others without expecting anything in return. You didn't mess up, Lena said firmly. Look what you've built. This business, this reputation, your daughter. You've created something real and meaningful. So have you, apparently, technology CEO. You did everything we talked about doing together. You changed the world. I built a company, Lena corrected. That's not the same thing. Whitmore Technologies, Jack said slowly. I should have made the connection earlier. Your company is everywhere. You're one of the most successful entrepreneurs under 40. Success isn't the same as fulfillment. Jack studied her face carefully. Are you happy, Elena? Did all that ambition lead somewhere good? The question was too perceptive, too direct. Lena wanted to lie, to maintain the facade that her empire brought satisfaction. But something about this garden, this conversation, this man who knew her before she learned to armor herself, demanded honesty. I'm successful, she said. I'm respected. I'm wealthy beyond anything I imagined possible. And I'm completely alone. I work 90 hours a week building something that will exist long after I'm gone, and I come home to an empty penthouse with a view of a city where I don't have a single real friend. That sounds lonely. It's safe. People can't leave if you never let them close enough to matter. Jack flinched. Is that what I did to you? Made you afraid to connect? You showed me that even love doesn't last. That people leave when things get hard. So I decided to become someone who didn't need anyone. It's worked perfectly. I'm untouchable. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Elena, don't. She stood abruptly, needing space. I shouldn't have come here. You have a life, a daughter who needs you. I'm just a reminder of roads not taken. Jack stood too, closing the distance she'd tried to create. You're not just anything. Seeing you again, it's like remembering I used to be someone different. Someone who believed happiness was possible. You have happiness. Your daughter. Your work. Your community. I have purpose, Jack corrected. That's not the same thing. I love Sophie more than my own life, and I'm grateful for every day with her. But there's a part of me that's been dormant for 15 years. A part that remembered what it felt like to dream with someone, to plan a future together, to believe in something beyond just surviving. His honesty was breaking down walls Lena had spent years constructing. We can't go back. Too much has changed. We're different people now. I know. Jack's hand reached toward her face, then stopped, hovering uncertain. But maybe we don't need to go back. Maybe we could start from here. Figure out who we are now instead of mourning who we were. I don't know how to do that. I've forgotten how to let people in. Then maybe I can remind you. The same way you reminded me what it feels like to want something beyond basic survival. The wind chimes sang softly, filling the silence between them. Lena wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that second chances existed outside of fairy tales, but fear was a wall she'd built too high to simply climb over. I need time, she said finally. It's too much, too fast. Jack nodded, stepping back to give her space. I understand. Take whatever time you need, but Lena, I'm not running this time. Whatever you decide, I'll be here. The promise was simple, but it carried weight. Jack Miller didn't make commitments he couldn't keep. I should go, Lena said. I have work, responsibilities. Can I walk you back to your car? They returned to the parking lot in silence. Lena's Mercedes sat where she'd left it, gleaming and expensive and completely out of place in the gravel lot beside pickup trucks and aging sedans. Different worlds, Jack said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Yeah, but maybe that doesn't matter as much as we think it does. Before Lena could respond, a child's voice called out, Dad! Sophie ran from the residential entrance, her backpack bouncing, her face bright with excitement. She skidded to a stop when she saw Lena, suddenly shy. Sorry, she said to her father. I didn't know you had a customer. Not a customer, Jack said. This is Lena. She's... He hesitated, clearly uncertain how to explain. A friend, Lena finished. An old friend of your dad's. Sophie examined Lena with the frank assessment only children managed. You're really pretty, like princess pretty. Despite everything, Lena smiled. Thank you. You're pretty beautiful yourself. I look like my mom. Dad says so all the time. Sophie turned to Jack. Can we have tacos for dinner? You promised if I finished my math homework early. Tacos it is, Jack agreed. Now go wash your hands. I'll be inside in a minute. Sophie bounded back toward the house, energy incarnate. Watching her go, Lena felt a pang of something she couldn't name. This was Jack's life, real and full and demanding. There was no space for complications, for ghosts from his past, for a woman who'd built her existence around avoiding exactly this kind of vulnerability. She's wonderful, Lena said. She's everything. Jack's voice was soft. And she's been asking for months when I'm going to get a girlfriend. Apparently she's the only kid in her class with a single parent, and she thinks I'm lonely. Are you? Yes, but not in ways a girlfriend would fix. I'm lonely for the person I used to be, the one who believed in more than just getting through each day. He looked at Lena directly. Seeing you again reminded me that version of myself existed, that maybe he could exist again. Jack, I know, you need time. I'm not asking for answers right now. I'm just telling you the truth. You showing up on that mountain road felt like the universe giving me a second chance at something I'd given up on. What if I can't be what you remember? What if I'm too different now? Then we'll figure out who we are instead of who we were. But we can't figure out anything if you disappear back to your empire and pretend this encounter never happened. He was right. Running was her pattern. Building walls, maintaining distance, protecting herself from the risk of caring too much. It had kept her safe for 15 years. It had also kept her alone. I'll stay, Lena heard herself say. For a few days. Not here in Pine Ridge, but close enough. I'll figure some things out. About myself. About what I actually want instead of what I've convinced myself I should want. Jack's smile was tentative but genuine. That sounds like a start. I can't promise anything beyond that. I'm not asking you to. Just don't vanish. Give us a chance to figure out if what we're feeling is real or just nostalgia. Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. She climbed into her Mercedes, and Jack stepped back, watching as she started the engine. Their eyes met through the windshield, and Lena saw hope there. Fragile and uncertain, but real. She drove away slowly, watching Jack in her rearview mirror until a curve took him from view. Only then did she realize she was still wearing his flannel shirt from the night before, wrapped around her shoulders like a shield against more than just the cold. Her phone buzzed with incoming messages. Her assistant, increasingly frantic about her silence. Her CFO demanding decisions on the quarterly projections. The real world pulling her back toward obligations she'd neglected. But Lena didn't turn east toward the city. Instead, she found a larger town 30 miles north, checked into a proper hotel, and for the first time in her professional life, turned off her phone completely. Then she sat on the hotel bed and let herself cry. For the girl she'd been. For the man Jack had become. For 15 years of building walls instead of bridges. For the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to choose differently. When the tears finally stopped, Lena felt emptied out and strangely lighter. She opened her laptop and typed a message to her executive team. Taking personal time. Handle everything. I trust you. Then she closed the computer and looked out the window at mountains that stretched toward a sky so vast it made her ambition feel small and irrelevant. Somewhere in those mountains, a single father was making tacos for his daughter, living a life rich with purpose, if not wealth. And he'd suggested that maybe different worlds could touch, could merge, could create something neither had imagined possible. Lena didn't know if she was brave enough to find out, but for the first time in 15 years she wanted to try. That had to count for something. The next morning, she drove back to Pine Ridge with a plan, not to declare feelings or make promises she couldn't keep, but simply to be present, to see who Jack was now, completely. To meet the daughter who'd never known her mother but clearly thrived under her father's devotion, to understand what choosing him would actually mean beyond romantic fantasy. Miller's auto repair was already busy when she arrived. Jack was under a truck, only his legs visible, his voice carrying as he explained something to a customer. Lena waited, watching the rhythm of small-town life flow around the shop. When Jack emerged, grease-stained and focused, his face transformed at the sight of her. "You came back," he said. "I said I would. People don't always mean that." "I do." Jack wiped his hands, suddenly uncertain. "I'm swamped today. Mrs. Chen's radiator, Mr. Patterson's brake line, and someone's bringing in a truck with a mysterious engine noise at 2. I won't be free until late." "I wasn't expecting you to entertain me, I just—" Lena paused, feeling vulnerable in ways she'd forgotten were possible. "I wanted to see your life, the real version, not just the parts that fit neatly into conversation." Something shifted in Jack's expression. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition that she was trying despite her fear. "There's a coffee shop 2 doors down," he said. "Terrible coffee, but good Wi-Fi. You could work there if you need to. And Sophie gets home from school around 3:30. She'd probably love to meet you properly." "Are you sure? I don't want to complicate things with your daughter." "Sophie's the least complicated part of my life. Everything else is complicated. She's just joy and questions and too much energy. Honestly, she could probably teach you something about not overthinking everything." Lena smiled despite herself. "Okay, coffee shop until 3:30. Then I'll meet the girl who has your whole heart." "She'll love you," Jack said with certainty. "How could she not?" "Because I'm terrified of children," Lena thought. "Because I've spent 15 years avoiding anything that might require emotional vulnerability. Because I don't know how to be authentic when every instinct screams to maintain protective distance." But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she simply nodded and walked toward the coffee shop, feeling Jack's eyes on her until she disappeared from view. The next hours would test whether Lena Whitmore, CEO, entrepreneur, woman who'd conquered every challenge through sheer determination, could handle the hardest task of all, simply being human with people who might actually matter. The coffee shop was exactly as Jack had described: terrible coffee, ancient Wi-Fi router, and decor that suggested the owner had given up on aesthetics sometime during the Clinton administration. But it had outlets, functioning internet, and a corner booth where Lena could work without constant interruption. She ordered something the menu optimistically called a cappuccino and settled in with her laptop, determined to at least pretend productivity mattered. Her inbox had exploded overnight. 63 new messages, most flagged urgent, all demanding immediate attention from the CEO, who'd apparently vanished without proper explanation. Lena scanned the subject lines with detachment that would have alarmed her a week ago. Contract negotiations, product launch timelines, personnel disputes requiring executive intervention. the machinery of her empire grinding forward, occasionally sputtering when her guiding hand disappeared. She answered 3 emails with brief directives, then closed her laptop. The rest could wait. Her executive team was competent. She'd hired them specifically for their ability to function without constant supervision. If they couldn't handle a few days without her micromanagement, she'd built her company wrong. Through the coffee shop's grimy window, Lena could see Miller's auto repair across the street. Jack moved between garage bays with practiced efficiency, his attention divided between mechanical problems and customer conversations. Even from this distance, she could see how people relaxed in his presence, trusting him not just with their vehicles, but with their concerns about affording repairs, about getting to work on time, about the 100 small anxieties that made up ordinary lives. This was his kingdom, not built on market disruption or competitive advantage, but on simple competence and genuine care. It was smaller than her empire, certainly, but watching Jack help an elderly man understand why his transmission needed replacing, using patience instead of technical jargon, Lena wondered if perhaps his kingdom touched more actual lives than hers ever had. Her software powered millions of devices, but she'd never met a single person whose life was fundamentally better because Whitmore Technologies existed. She'd created shareholder value, not human connection. The realization sat uncomfortably in her chest. At 3:15, a yellow school bus rumbled past the coffee shop, and Lena felt her anxiety spike. She'd agreed to meet Sophie, to step into the most important relationship in Jack's life, to be evaluated by a 10-year-old who would see through any pretense immediately. Children always did. She paid for her terrible coffee and crossed the street, her heart pounding with nerves that boardroom presentations never triggered. Jack was finishing with a customer, and he caught her eye, nodding toward the residential entrance. Lena walked around the building to the small garden where they'd talked yesterday, trying to calm breathing that had gone shallow with fear. The back door opened, and Sophie burst out like a small tornado of energy. She wore jeans and a t-shirt declaring her allegiance to some cartoon Lena didn't recognize, her dark hair escaping from its ponytail in wild curls. When she saw Lena, she skidded to a stop, suddenly shy again. "Hi," Sophie said. "You're the pretty lady from yesterday." "I'm Lena, and you're Sophie. Dad says you were friends in college, like a really long time ago when he was young." Despite her nervousness, Lena smiled. "Your dad's still young. He says he feels old, especially when I make him play video games." Sophie moved closer, examining Lena with frank curiosity. "Are you visiting Pine Ridge for work? We don't get a lot of business people here." "Sort of. I had a work trip nearby and I wanted to see your dad again. We lost touch for a long time." "That's sad. Friends shouldn't lose touch." Sophie said it with the absolute certainty of childhood, as if maintaining relationships was simple as long as people tried. "Do you live far away?" "Pretty far, in the city, about 4 hours from here." "The city's too crowded. We went once for my birthday, and there were people everywhere. I like it better here where I know everyone." Sophie settled onto the garden bench, patting the space beside her in clear invitation. Lena sat, acutely aware of being evaluated. "Your dad says you're really smart," Sophie continued, "that you run a big company." "I do. We make software, computer programs that help people do things more easily." "Like apps?" "Exactly like apps." Sophie nodded seriously. "I want to make apps when I grow up, or maybe be a veterinarian, or possibly a professional soccer player. I haven't decided yet." "You have time to figure it out." "That's what Dad says. He says I should try lots of things before I decide what I love most." Sophie swung her legs, her sneakers not quite reaching the ground. "Did you always know you wanted to make apps?" The question was more complicated than Sophie realized. "I knew I wanted to build something that mattered, something that would prove I was smart enough to succeed, but I didn't always know exactly what form that would take." "Why did you need to prove you were smart? Were people mean to you?" Children's directness was terrifying. "Sometimes. I grew up without much money, and I went to a school where everyone else had a lot. Some people made me feel like I didn't belong." Sophie's expression turned fierce. "That's bullying. Mrs. Chen says bullying is when people make others feel small to make themselves feel big. Did you tell a teacher?" "I handled it by working harder than everyone else. By becoming so successful they couldn't ignore me anymore." "That sounds lonely." Sophie said with devastating accuracy. Wouldn't it be better to find people who liked you already, instead of making mean people notice you? Lena felt something crack in her chest. This child had just articulated what 15 years of therapy might have eventually reached. She'd spent her entire adult life seeking validation from people whose opinions shouldn't have mattered, instead of building connections with people who might actually care. "You're very wise," Lena said quietly. "Dad says that too. He says I'm an old soul, whatever that means." Sophie shifted topics with the speed only children managed. "Do you like soccer? My team has a game on Saturday. Dad always comes, but it would be cool if you came too. He doesn't really understand the rules, so he just cheers whenever anything happens." "Sophie," Jack's voice came from the doorway, gentle but firm. "Don't ambush Lena with invitations. She probably has to get back to her work." "Actually," Lena heard herself say, "I'd love to come to your game, if that's okay with both of you." Sophie's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? That's awesome. We're playing the Timber Ridge Tigers, and they're really good, but Coach says we have a chance if we remember to pass instead of everyone trying to score alone." "Teamwork is important," Lena agreed. "Exactly. That's what I keep telling Melissa, but she's a ball hog." Sophie jumped off the bench. "I'm going to make you a good luck sign. What's your favorite color?" "Blue? Perfect. I have blue glitter markers." Sophie darted toward the door, then turned back. "Lena? I'm glad you and Dad found each other again. He smiles different when you're around, like he means it all the way." Then she disappeared inside, leaving Lena alone with Jack and a truth she wasn't ready to examine too closely. Jack sat where Sophie had been, close enough that Lena could feel his warmth. "Sorry about the ambush. Sophie doesn't really understand boundaries yet. She's incredible, smart and kind and completely herself. She's the best thing I ever did." Pride filled Jack's voice. "Even on days when parenting feels impossible, she reminds me why everything was worth it." "She said you smile different around me." Jack was quiet for a moment. "Kids notice things adults pretend not to see. I do smile different around you. It's not something I can control." "Jack, I know. You need time. You're figuring things out. I'm not pushing." He turned to face her. "But I meant what I said yesterday. I'm not running. Whatever you need to figure out, I'll be here when you're ready." "What if I'm never ready? What if I'm too broken to do this? Then we'll figure that out too." "But Lena, you're not broken. You're just scared. There's a difference." His certainty was both comforting and terrifying. Lena wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that fear could be overcome through simple willingness to try. But she'd built her entire life around avoiding exactly this kind of vulnerability. "Tell me about her," Lena said, needing to understand completely. "About Sarah. About what you had together." Jack's expression became complicated. "Why?" "Because if we're going to try this, I need to know what I'm stepping into. I need to understand what you lost, what you might be looking for to replace it." "I'm not looking to replace Sarah. What we had was real, but it was also—" Jack paused, searching for words. "It was built on her accepting that I loved someone else first, that she was my second choice, and I was honest about that from the beginning." That must have hurt her. It did. She was braver than I deserved, choosing to love me anyway. But it wasn't fair to her, and I knew it. I tried to make it work, tried to love her completely, and in many ways I succeeded. But there was always a part of me that remained locked away. The part that remembered what it felt like to love someone who challenged me, who pushed me to be better, who believed I could change the world. I wasn't that person. I was just a scared kid pretending to be confident. You were brilliant and fierce, and absolutely terrified anyone would notice you were faking it. I noticed. It made me love you more, not less. Jack's voice was soft. Sarah was kind and patient and deserved someone whose whole heart was available. I gave her everything I could, but the vault where I kept my memories of you never fully opened. That's not her fault. It's mine. Do you feel guilty? For not loving her enough? Every day. But I also know she chose that life with full understanding of what I could offer. She decided it was enough. I tried to honor that choice by being the best husband and father I could be. He looked at Lena directly. When she was dying, she made me promise something. What? That I wouldn't spend the rest of my life alone out of some misguided loyalty to her memory. She said Sophie deserved to see me happy, to understand that love was possible even after loss. She said, his voice caught. She said if I ever found you again, I should be brave enough to try. Lena's eyes burned. She knew about me? I told her everything. The night I proposed, I explained exactly who you were, what you'd meant to me, why I could never fully forget you. Sarah said she could live with loving a man who'd lost someone, as long as I promised never to lie about it. She sounds remarkable. She was. And she deserved better than what I could give her. But she loved Sophie with everything she had. And in the end, that's what mattered most. Jack's hand found Lena's, tentative. I'm not asking you to compete with her memory. I'm asking if maybe we could build something new, something that honors what we both lost while creating something neither of us expected. His hand was warm, calloused from work, completely different from the smooth grip of executives Lena occasionally tolerated touching her. This hand fixed broken things. This hand built solutions. This hand had raised a daughter alone and held a dying wife, and continued showing up every day despite grief that would have destroyed lesser men. Lena interlaced her fingers with his, the gesture feeling monumental. I don't know how to do this. The vulnerable thing, the letting people in thing. I've spent 15 years perfecting emotional distance. So we learn together. You teach me that it's okay to want more than just survival. I'll teach you that connecting with people doesn't have to mean losing yourself. What if we fail? Then we'll have tried. That's more than either of us has done in 15 years. Through the window, Lena could see Sophie inside, bent over paper and markers, creating her promised good luck sign with intense concentration. This child who'd lost her mother too young, who'd been raised by a father doing his best against impossible odds, who somehow remained bright and open and convinced the world was fundamentally good. I'm terrified, Lena admitted. Me too. But Lena, I've been terrified for 15 years. At least this fear comes with hope attached. They sat in the garden as afternoon faded toward evening, holding hands like teenagers, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. Jack told her about the small moments that made parenting worthwhile. Sophie's first soccer goal, her obsession with dinosaurs that lasted exactly 3 months, the way she still crawled into his bed during thunderstorms. Lena found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. The imposter syndrome that plagued her despite objective success, the way she sometimes drove to her childhood neighborhood just to remind herself how far she'd come. The recurring dream where she stood in front of her company's board, unable to remember why any of it mattered. You're searching for meaning, Jack said. Success isn't enough anymore. Success was supposed to be everything. That was the whole point. Maybe the point changed and you didn't notice. Sophie emerged eventually, carrying a poster board decorated with blue glitter spelling Go Lena, surrounded by hand-drawn stars and soccer balls. Her smile was so proud, so genuine, that Lena felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling further. It's beautiful, Lena said, meaning it completely. I'll bring it to your game. You have to cheer really loud. Dad's not shy, so you shouldn't be either. I'll do my best. Jack made dinner. Simple pasta with marinara sauce Sophie helped prepare, garlic bread that came from the grocery store's bakery, salad from a bag. They ate at a small table in the apartment above the shop, and Lena couldn't remember the last time a meal had felt so comfortable. No business discussions, no networking agendas, just a man and his daughter, and a woman trying to remember how to exist without armor. Sophie chattered through dinner about her upcoming science project, her best friend's birthday party drama, her theory that her teacher was secretly a superhero because no normal person could be that patient. Jack listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he genuinely cared about the minute details of fourth-grade social dynamics. This was his real life, not the heroic version where he saved stranded motorists or kept an entire town's vehicles running. Just the daily work of raising a child alone, of making sure homework got done and vegetables got eaten and someone was listening when 10-year-old problems felt overwhelming. After dinner, Sophie insisted on showing Lena her room, a space divided between childish interests and emerging adolescence, posters of boy bands competing with dinosaur drawings, a bookshelf holding everything from picture books to middle-grade novels about girls who saved the world through cleverness rather than magic. Mom gave me this, Sophie said, pulling a worn, stuffed elephant from her bed. Dad says she picked it out right after I was born. I don't remember her, but I still sleep with Mr. Trunk every night. The casual way Sophie mentioned her mother broke Lena's heart. This child had lost so much, yet somehow remained intact. I'm sure she loved you very much, Lena said quietly. Dad says she did. He tells me stories about her, so I'll know who she was. Some kids at school think it's weird that I don't have a mom, but Dad says every family looks different, and different doesn't mean wrong. Your dad's right about that. Sophie studied her thoughtfully. Do you think you'll stay? In Pine Ridge, I mean? Or at least visit a lot? I don't know yet, sweetheart. I live pretty far away, and I have work responsibilities that make it hard to travel. But you like Dad, right? I can tell. And he definitely likes you. He made fancy coffee this morning instead of his regular gross stuff. He only does that when he's trying to impress someone. Lena couldn't help but smile. Does he impress people often? Nope, just you. Sophie's expression turned serious. He's lonely, even though he pretends he's not. I hear him sometimes at night, talking to Mom's picture. He tells her about his day and asks if she thinks he's doing okay with me. It makes me sad that he doesn't have anyone real to talk to. The image of Jack alone at night, confiding in a photograph because he had no living person to share his burdens with, was devastating. Here was a man everyone relied on, and he had no one to rely on himself except the memory of a wife who'd accepted his divided heart and loved him anyway. Your dad's lucky to have you, Lena said. I know. I'm pretty awesome. Sophie grinned, childish confidence restored. But he deserves grown-up company too, someone who makes him smile the way he smiles at you. Before Lena could respond, Jack appeared in the doorway. Sophie, it's almost bedtime. Stop interrogating our guest. I'm not interrogating, I'm just talking. But Sophie moved toward her bathroom anyway, clearly familiar with the evening routine. Lena, you should stay for breakfast tomorrow. Dad makes really good pancakes on Wednesdays. We'll see, Jack said diplomatically. Say goodnight. Good night, Lena. See you Saturday at my game. Then she disappeared into the bathroom, leaving Jack and Lena alone in the hallway decorated with Sophie's school artwork and family photos that included the mother she'd never really known. She's not subtle, Jack said apologetically. She's wonderful, and she's right. You do deserve company. You've been alone too long. I had my reasons. Fear isn't a good enough reason. Not anymore. Jack moved closer, his hand finding Lena's again with growing familiarity. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I want to try. I'm terrified and I'll probably mess everything up because I have no idea how to do this. But Jack, you and Sophie, you're real in ways I'd forgotten existed. My whole life is built on things that look impressive but feel hollow. She gestured around the modest apartment, hearing Sophie brushing her teeth through the bathroom door, feeling the warmth of a home built on love instead of money. This matters. I don't want to walk away from it. What about your company? Your life in the city? My company runs fine without me micromanaging every decision, and my life in the city is just an expensive cage I built to feel successful. Lena looked at him directly. I'm not saying I'm moving to Pine Ridge tomorrow or that I have all the answers, but I'm saying I want to figure this out. If you're willing to be patient with someone who's forgotten how to be human. Jack pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her in an embrace that felt like coming home. I've waited 15 years. I can wait a little longer while you figure out what you need. They stood in the hallway holding each other while Sophie finished her bedtime routine, and Lena felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. This wasn't the dramatic romance of movies or the strategic partnership of corporate mergers. This was messy and complicated, and required her to be vulnerable in ways that terrified her completely. But it was also real. And after 15 years of chasing success that never satisfied, real felt like exactly what she'd been missing. Sophie emerged from the bathroom in dinosaur pajamas, saw them embracing, and grinned. I knew it. Dad's going to have a girlfriend, and I'm going to have... She paused. What would you be? A bonus mom? Slow down, kiddo, Jack said, but he was smiling. Lena and I are just figuring things out. No labels yet. But you're figuring it out together, right? That's what matters. Yes, Lena said before she could second-guess herself. We're figuring it out together. Sophie hugged them both, her small arms barely reaching around their waists. This is the best Wednesday ever. After Sophie was tucked into bed, Jack walked Lena to her car. The night was cold and clear, stars so brilliant they looked unreal. They stood in the parking lot, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "Saturday," Jack said. "Sophie's soccer game. You really want to come?" "I really do. And Jack? I'm staying in the area for at least a week, maybe longer. I need to figure out what I actually want instead of what I've convinced myself I should want." "Will your company survive without you?" "If it doesn't, I built it wrong. An empire that requires my constant presence to function isn't sustainable anyway." Jack kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was precious and might break. It was nothing like the urgent kisses of their college days, fueled by youth and hormones and the belief that passion solved everything. This was better, deeper, a promise instead of a demand. When they pulled apart, Lena was shaking. "I haven't done this in a long time," she admitted. "Me either. We'll remember together." Lena drove back to her hotel feeling lighter than she had in years. Her phone showed 47 new messages, most marked urgent. She read exactly 0 of them. Instead, she opened her laptop and began drafting an email to her executive team, explaining that she was taking an extended leave to handle personal matters. Her CFO would serve as acting CEO. All major decisions would be made by committee. She trusted them to run the company she'd built. The email felt like jumping off a cliff. For 15 years, Whitmore Technologies had been her identity, her purpose, her proof that she mattered. Stepping away, even temporarily, meant admitting that maybe her company wasn't the most important thing in her life. Maybe it never had been. She'd just convinced herself it was because success felt safer than connection. Lena hit send before she could reconsider, then closed her laptop and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the mountains, Jack was probably checking on Sophie one last time, making sure she was truly asleep, maybe standing at his own window looking at the same stars and wondering if this second chance could possibly be real. Tomorrow, Lena would face the consequences of her impulsive decision. Her board would panic. Her investors would demand explanations. The business press would speculate about her sudden absence from the company she'd built from nothing. But tonight, she was just a woman who'd rediscovered something she'd thought was lost forever. Hope. Connection. The possibility that happiness didn't require sacrificing everything else to achieve it. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. The response to Lena's email arrived faster than she'd anticipated. By 7 the next morning, her phone was vibrating continuously with calls from board members, her CFO, and her assistant who'd apparently been awake all night fielding panicked inquiries. Lena silenced the phone and went for a run instead, something she hadn't done in months because her mornings were always consumed by early conference calls with international teams. The mountain air burned her lungs in the best way. She ran without destination, just movement and breathing and the strange freedom of having absolutely nowhere she needed to be. When she finally stopped, hands on her knees and gasping, she realized she'd run nearly 5 miles. Her designer running shoes, purchased for appearance rather than function, were probably ruined. She didn't care. Back at the hotel, she showered and checked her messages. 63 missed calls, 42 text messages. Her assistant had sent increasingly frantic updates about board members threatening emergency meetings and investors demanding immediate explanations for the CEO's sudden absence. Lena responded with a single message to her executive team. "I have complete confidence in your ability to manage the company. This is not a crisis. This is me trusting you to do the jobs I hired you to do. I'll be available for true emergencies only. Everything else goes through the acting CEO." Then she turned off her phone completely and drove to Pine Ridge. Jack's shop was already busy when she arrived. 3 cars in various states of repair and a line of customers waiting for his attention. Lena didn't interrupt. Instead, she walked to the coffee shop and actually ordered their terrible cappuccino, settling in to work on something she'd been avoiding for years, examining what she actually wanted her life to look like. The truth was uncomfortable. She'd built an empire but couldn't name a single employee she'd consider a friend. She'd accumulated wealth that could buy almost anything except genuine connection. She'd achieved every goal she'd set in college, except the one that had actually mattered, being happy. Jack had achieved none of their shared ambitions. He'd dropped out, moved to a tiny town, spent 15 years fixing cars instead of changing the world through technology. By every metric Lena had used to measure success, he'd failed completely. Yet watching him through the coffee shop window, she saw someone at peace with his choices. Someone who woke up knowing his work mattered to real people with real problems. Someone whose daughter adored him not because he was impressive, but because he was present. Lena's phone buzzed despite being supposedly off. A calendar reminder she'd set weeks ago. Board meeting in 2 hours, critical quarterly review. Her presence absolutely mandatory. She dismissed the notification and kept working on her personal audit. What did she actually enjoy about running her company? The strategic thinking, yes. The problem solving, absolutely. But the endless meetings where executives postured for dominance, the corporate politics where every decision required navigating fragile egos, the distance from actual creation, spending all her time managing people who managed people who actually built things. She hated most of it, had hated it for years, but she'd convinced herself that suffering was the price of significance. Around noon, Jack appeared at the coffee shop door, grease-stained and looking exhausted. He spotted Lena immediately, and his whole face transformed with that smile she was beginning to crave like oxygen. "Busy morning?" she asked as he slid into the booth across from her. Mrs. Patterson's brake line turned out to be connected to her entire brake system needing replacement. Took 3 hours longer than expected. He flagged down the waitress. "Coffee, please. The real stuff, not whatever fancy torture you're drinking." "My coffee is perfectly adequate." "Your coffee tastes like regret and disappointment." Jack's smile softened the insult. "What are you working on?" Lena turned her laptop so he could see the document she'd been drafting. "Trying to figure out what I actually want instead of what I've been telling myself I want." Jack scanned the screen, his expression thoughtful. "This looks like a resignation letter." "It's a proposal for transitioning to a different role, less operational control, more strategic vision. Let other people run the daily operations while I focus on the things I actually enjoy." "Will your board accept that?" "Probably not. They hired me to be CEO, not some advisory consultant who pops in occasionally with ideas." Lena closed the laptop. "But I'm starting to realize I don't care what they accept. I built the company. If they want to force me out completely, they can buy me out and I'll start something new." Jack's eyebrows rose. That's a dramatic shift from the woman who showed up 3 days ago. 3 days ago, I was running on autopilot, convinced that success meant sacrificing everything else. Now I'm wondering if maybe I had it backwards. Maybe success should support the life I want, not replace it. The waitress brought Jack's coffee, and he wrapped both hands around the mug like it was precious. "What kind of life do you want?" It was the question Lena had been avoiding. Wanting things meant risking disappointment. Naming desires out loud made them vulnerable to destruction. But sitting across from Jack in a terrible coffee shop in a town that barely registered on maps, she felt brave enough to try. "I want to wake up excited about my work instead of dreading the day ahead. I want relationships that matter more than networking contacts. I want to build something meaningful instead of just profitable." She paused, gathering courage. "And I want to see if whatever this is between us could be real, not just nostalgia or fantasy, but actual partnership." Jack was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was memorizing every detail. "That's terrifying to say out loud." "Completely. I keep waiting for you to laugh or tell me I'm being ridiculous." "Lena, I've been alone for 8 years convincing myself that was enough. That Sophie was enough, and she is. She's everything. But seeing you again reminded me that there's a difference between surviving and actually living." He reached across the table, finding her hand. "I want this to be real too. I'm just scared we're moving too fast, that we'll crash into reality and hurt each other all over again. So we slow down. We figure this out without rushing." Even as she said it, Lena knew slow was a relative term. They'd already crossed boundaries that cautious people would have approached gradually, but nothing about their situation was typical. "Sophie's game is Saturday morning," Jack said. "After that, maybe we could do something, just the two of us. An actual date instead of accidentally ending up together." "I'd like that. Where would we even go? Pine Ridge isn't exactly full of romantic restaurants. There's a place about 30 miles north. Nothing fancy, but they have a view of the lake and food that doesn't taste like cardboard. We could drive up after the game, have an early dinner, talk about things that aren't auto repair or software development." "That sounds perfect." They sat in comfortable silence. hands linked across the table, while the coffee shop's other patrons pretended not to notice. Small towns thrived on gossip, and Jack Miller having coffee with a mysterious woman was probably already spreading through Pine Ridge's informal communication network. "People are going to talk," Lena said. "Let them. I stopped caring about gossip years ago." Jack's thumb traced circles on her palm. "But I do want to be careful with Sophie. She's already attached to you, which is wonderful and terrifying. If this doesn't work out, it'll hurt her. I know." The responsibility felt enormous. Lena had no experience with children, no framework for understanding how her choices would impact a 10-year-old who'd already lost one important woman in her life. "Maybe I shouldn't come to the game. Maybe we should figure out what we are before involving her more deeply." "Too late for that. She made you a poster." Jack smiled despite the seriousness. "And honestly, I think she needs to see this, to understand that sometimes people get second chances, that her dad can be happy beyond just being her dad. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not good with kids, or I can't handle the small town dynamics, or I realize my life in the city is what I actually want? Then we'll deal with it. But Lena, you can't live your whole life avoiding risk because something might not work out. That's not living. That's just existing safely." He was right. She knew he was right. But knowing and acting were completely different challenges. Jack's phone rang, and he glanced at the screen with a sigh. "Work. Someone's transmission just gave up on the highway. I need to go tow them in." "Go. I'll be here when you get back." He kissed her quickly before leaving, and Lena felt the absence of his presence immediately. She was falling too fast, feeling too much, letting this matter more than was safe. Every instinct screamed to protect herself, to rebuild her walls before the inevitable pain arrived. Instead, she opened her laptop and continued drafting her proposal for stepping back from daily operations. If she was going to try this, really try, she needed to create space in her life for something beyond work. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Lena worked mornings from the coffee shop, handling only the most critical business issues and delegating everything else to her executive team. Afternoons she spent with Jack when he could break away, learning about his business, meeting the people whose lives he touched through simple competence and genuine care. Evenings increasingly included Sophie, dinners together in the apartment above the shop, homework help that Jack supervised while Lena learned how fourth-grade math had changed completely since her own childhood. She met Mary from the diner properly, enduring the knowing looks and pointed questions about her intentions toward Jack. She met the shop's part-time mechanic, a teenager named Marcus, whom Jack was training the same way he'd been trained, through patience and actual teaching instead of exploitation. She met Sophie's soccer coach, her teacher, her best friend's mother, all the people who formed the web of community that held Jack's life together. And slowly, she started to understand what she'd been missing. These weren't networking contacts or strategic relationships. These were actual connections, people who cared about each other's well-being beyond what they could gain from the association. It was foreign and uncomfortable and strangely wonderful. Friday night, Sophie insisted on a movie night. They crowded onto the couch in the small living room, Sophie between Jack and Lena, watching an animated film about a girl who saved her village through cleverness instead of magic. Halfway through, Sophie fell asleep, her head on Lena's shoulder, completely trusting. Jack carefully lifted his daughter and carried her to bed. When he returned, Lena was standing at the window, looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. "She likes you," Jack said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "Really likes you. This morning she asked if you were going to be her new mom." Lena's heart stopped. "What did you tell her?" "That adults don't work that way, that you and I are figuring out if we want to date, and dating doesn't automatically mean becoming a family." He paused. "But she said you already feel like family, so what's the difference?" "She's 10. Everything is simple when you're 10. Maybe we make things too complicated when we grow up." Lena turned to face him. "Jack, I don't know how to be a mother. I don't know how to be a partner. I've spent 15 years alone because it was safer than risking this kind of vulnerability. What if I can't do it? What if I hurt you both? What if you don't? What if this actually works?" Jack's hands found her waist, pulling her closer. "I'm scared too, Lena. Terrified, actually. But I'm more scared of letting you walk away again, of wondering for another 15 years what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. She kissed him then, deep and urgent, trying to communicate everything she couldn't say. That she was falling for him all over again, or maybe had never stopped. That his daughter was worming her way into a heart Lena had thought was permanently closed. That the life he'd built, small and simple and real, felt more meaningful than her entire empire. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow," he said, "after the game, we'll go to dinner and talk about what this actually means, what we're willing to risk, what we need from each other, what we're building." "Okay, but Jack, I already know what I want." "What?" "This. You and Sophie, and a life that actually matters. I just need to figure out how to make it work with everything else I've built. We'll figure it out together." Saturday morning arrived bright and cold, perfect weather for youth soccer. Lena dressed carefully in her new jeans and a warm sweater, feeling absurdly nervous about attending a children's sporting event. She'd negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts without anxiety, but the thought of sitting on sidelines with other parents terrified her completely. Jack and Sophie picked her up at her hotel, Sophie bouncing with excitement in the back seat, chattering about team strategy and which players were most likely to score. She wore her uniform with pride, her hair pulled back in the required ponytail, her cleats already muddy from practicing in the backyard that morning. "Did you bring the sign I made you?" Sophie asked Lena. "It's in my car. I'll grab it when we get to the field." "Good. Everyone needs to know you're cheering for me specifically, not just the whole team." The soccer field was exactly what Lena expected. Scraggly grass, portable goals, bleachers that had seen better decades. Parents clustered in groups, some bringing elaborate camping chairs and coffee thermoses, others huddled for warmth in team spirit wear that declared their children's names and numbers. Jack led them to a spot on the bleachers, greeting other parents with easy familiarity. Several people looked at Lena with open curiosity, clearly wondering who the stranger was and what her presence meant. One woman, Sophie's best friend's mother, introduced herself immediately. "I'm Karen. You must be Lena. Sophie hasn't stopped talking about you all week. Apparently you're really smart and really pretty and make her dad smile like he used to before his wife died." Lena felt her face heat. "Sophie's very sweet." "Sophie's very perceptive. And she's right. Jack does seem different lately, lighter." Karen's expression was kind but assessing. "He's a good man who's been alone too long. I hope you're planning to stick around." "I'm trying to figure that out." "Well, figure it out quickly. That man deserves happiness, and his daughter deserves to see what a healthy relationship looks like." The game started before Lena could respond. She held up Sophie's glittery sign, and Sophie waved enthusiastically from the field before the whistle blew. Then chaos erupted. 10-year-olds running in semi-organized patterns, occasionally remembering to pass, mostly just chasing the ball in an enthusiastic swarm. Jack cheered loudly for every play, regardless of which team executed it. He explained rules to Lena when she looked confused, his commentary mixing technical accuracy with paternal pride. When Sophie successfully stole the ball from an opponent and passed to a teammate who scored, Jack was on his feet yelling encouragement like she'd won the World Cup. Lena found herself getting swept up in the enthusiasm. She cheered when Sophie made good plays, groaned when the other team scored, felt genuine anxiety during close calls near their goal. It was absurd and wonderful, and completely outside her normal experience. Halftime arrived with the score tied 2-2. Sophie ran over, sweaty and grinning. "Did you see my steal?" she asked Lena. "Coach says I'm getting much better at reading the other team's moves." "You were amazing. That pass was perfect." Sophie beamed. "We're going to win this. I can feel it." Then she was gone, rejoining her teammates for whatever pep talk the coach was delivering. The second half was tighter, more defensive. Both teams clearly tired but determined. With 3 minutes left, Sophie got the ball near midfield and made a run down the side. Lena watched her weave between defenders, saw the moment she recognized an opening, and felt her heart leap as Sophie took the shot. The ball sailed past the goalkeeper's outstretched hands and hit the back of the net. 3-2. The crowd erupted, and Jack was shouting, and Lena found herself on her feet cheering for a child she'd known less than a week, but who already felt impossibly important. Sophie was mobbed by her teammates, and when she looked toward the bleachers, her smile was incandescent. She pointed at Lena and Jack, sharing her triumph with the people who mattered most. The final whistle blew with the score unchanged. Sophie's team had won, and she ran straight to Jack, who lifted her in a spinning hug before setting her down. "Did you see it?" Sophie asked breathlessly. "Did you see my goal?" "We saw everything," Jack said. "You were incredible." Sophie turned to Lena. "What did you think? Was it good?" "It was perfect. You read the field beautifully and took your shot at exactly the right moment. I'm so proud of you." The words came naturally, and only after she'd spoken them did Lena realize what she'd said. Proud. Like she had some claim to Sophie's achievements, some right to feel parental pride. But Sophie didn't seem to notice anything strange. She just hugged Lena with the same enthusiasm she'd hugged her father. "I'm glad you were here," Sophie said. "It felt lucky having you both watching." After the game, after congratulations from teammates and other parents, after Sophie had changed out of her uniform and gotten her post-game snack, Jack drove them back to town. Sophie chattered the whole way, reliving every play, already analyzing what the team needed to work on for next week's game. At the shop, Sophie hugged them both goodbye before running inside to video call her best friend and discuss the game in minute detail. Jack and Lena stood in the parking lot. The afternoon sun warmed despite the autumn chill. "Ready for that dinner?" Jack asked. "Absolutely. Let me grab my car and I'll follow you to the restaurant." "Or," Jack hesitated, "you could ride with me. We can pick up your car later." It was a small thing, choosing to drive together instead of separately, but it felt significant, like crossing another threshold toward actual partnership instead of just parallel existence. "Okay," Lena said, "let's ride together." The drive to the restaurant took them deeper into mountain wilderness, the road climbing until they reached a high plateau with views that stole breath. The restaurant itself was small and rustic, clearly built for locals rather than tourists, its deck overlooking a lake that reflected the sky like polished glass. They were seated at a table on the nearly empty deck, the afternoon hour too late for lunch and too early for dinner. A single waiter brought menus and water, then disappeared discreetly, leaving them alone with the view and each other. "This is beautiful," Lena said. "I used to come here with Sarah sometimes. After she died, I couldn't face it for years. But last month I brought Sophie for her birthday, and it felt okay again. Like I could appreciate the beauty without the grief overwhelming everything else." "Thank you for sharing it with me." Jack reached across the table, finding her hand with familiar ease. "Lena, I need to know what you're actually thinking. About us. About this. About what happens when you go back to your real life. What if I don't go back? At least not the same way I left." "What does that mean?" Lena took a breath, preparing to speak truths she'd barely admitted to herself. "My company can run without me being CEO. I've been micromanaging because I thought control was the same as success. But this week I've barely worked, and everything is fine. Better than fine, actually. My team is making good decisions without waiting for my approval." "So you're thinking of quitting?" "I'm thinking of restructuring my role, becoming chairman instead of CEO. Setting strategic direction without drowning in operational details. It would mean less money, less power, less prestige, but it would also mean freedom to actually have a life." Jack was quiet, processing. "And what would you do with that freedom?" "Spend time with people who matter. Build things I'm actually passionate about instead of just profitable. Maybe," she paused, terrified, "maybe split my time between the city and here. Keep an apartment for work obligations, but have a real home somewhere that feels like home." "Here? You'd consider living here?" "I'd consider trying. Not immediately. We barely know each other as adults, but eventually, if this works, if we work." Lena met his eyes. "Jack, I'm not asking you to change your life. Sophie needs stability, and you've built something important in Pine Ridge. I'm saying I could be the one to adapt, to build a life that accommodates both my work and whatever we might create together." The waiter appeared with their food, and they ate slowly, talking through logistics that felt both practical and absurd. How often could Lena realistically travel between cities? What would Sophie need from her if this became serious? How would Jack's community respond to their relationship? What happened if Lena's company demanded more time than she'd planned? They solved nothing definitive, but they talked honestly, laying out fears and hopes without pretense. And slowly, between bites of food and sips of wine, Lena felt the last of her walls crumbling. I'm falling in love with you again, she said quietly. Or maybe I never stopped. Either way, it terrifies me. Jack's smile was tender. I never stopped either. I just buried it deep enough that I could function. But Lena, you have to understand, if we do this, it's not just you and me, it's Sophie too. She's already half in love with you herself, and if this doesn't work out, it'll break her heart. I know, that's the most terrifying part. I don't know how to be a parent. Neither did I when Sophie was born. You learn by showing up and trying and messing up and trying again. There's no formula, just presence and genuine care. What if I'm not capable of that? You already are. You were present at her game. You cheered for her genuinely, not because you were performing, but because you cared. That's all parenting is at its core, showing up and caring. Lena felt tears threatening. This is so much bigger than I expected it to be. I know, we can slow down if you need to. I don't want to slow down. I want to jump into this completely and trust that we'll figure it out together. She laughed shakily, which is absolutely insane coming from someone who plans everything 3 moves ahead. Maybe that's growth, learning to embrace uncertainty instead of controlling everything. They finished dinner as the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in colors that looked impossible. Walking back to Jack's truck, hand in hand, Lena felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the simple comfort of being with someone who saw her completely and chose her anyway. On the drive back, Jack said quietly, "Move in with me." Lena's heart stopped. What? Not permanently, not yet. But stay in Pine Ridge for a while. Really try this instead of commuting back and forth. You said your company can run without you, so let it run. Give us a real chance instead of a long distance, maybe. Jack, that's crazy, I know. We've known each other as adults for less than a week, but Lena, I've wasted 15 years already. I don't want to waste more time being cautious when I know what I want. What about Sophie? Living together sends a pretty clear message. The guest room has its own bathroom. We'd be housemates, technically. Sophie would understand that sometimes adults need time to figure things out before making permanent decisions. He glanced at her. Unless you're not ready, in which case, forget I suggested it. Lena's mind raced through implications, logistics, risks. This was reckless and impulsive and completely unlike her usual calculated approach. But something Mary had said echoed in her thoughts. Jack deserved happiness. So did Sophie. And maybe, just maybe, so did Lena herself. Okay, she said. I'll stay. For a month, at least. Really try to make this work. Jack's smile could have powered cities. Yeah? Yeah, on one condition. I pay rent and contribute to household expenses. I'm not a charity case. Deal. Though I warn you, my mortgage is about 1/10 of what you probably pay for your penthouse. Then I'll contribute more to Sophie's college fund instead. They pulled into the shop's parking lot, and Jack turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. Instead, he turned to Lena, his expression serious. Thank you, he said quietly, for giving this a real chance, for being brave enough to risk something that matters. Thank you for being patient with someone who's forgotten how to be vulnerable. Jack leaned across the console and kissed her, deep and sweet and full of promise. And Lena kissed him back, letting herself fall completely, trusting that whatever happened next, they'd figure it out together. Inside the apartment, Sophie was waiting, her eyes bright with questions she was clearly dying to ask. When Jack explained that Lena would be staying with them for a while, Sophie's squeal could probably be heard in the next county. This is the best day ever. First I score the winning goal, and now Lena's moving in. Can she have the guest room next to mine? Can we do movie nights every Friday? Can she help with my science project? Jack laughed. One question at a time, kiddo. And remember, Lena's still going to work. She'll have her own schedule. But she'll be here. That's what matters. Sophie hugged Lena fiercely, and Lena hugged her back, feeling the last of her defenses shatter completely. This child, this man, this life they were tentatively building together. It was terrifying and uncertain and more real than anything Lena had experienced in 15 years. She was falling. No safety net, no guaranteed outcome, no control over how the story ended. And for the first time in her adult life, that felt exactly right. Moving into Jack's apartment above the shop took less than a day. Lena had lived in her penthouse for 6 years and accumulated almost nothing of personal value. Designer clothes she rarely wore outside work, expensive furniture chosen by an interior decorator, artwork purchased for investment rather than enjoyment. She packed 2 suitcases with practical clothing and her laptop, arranged for her assistant to handle the rest, and tried not to think too hard about how easily she was dismantling a life she'd spent years constructing. The guest room was small but comfortable, with a window overlooking the mountains and furnishings that were clearly Sophie's cast-offs from when she'd upgraded to a bigger bed. A faded poster of cartoon characters hung on one wall, and the dresser drawer stuck slightly when opened. It was nothing like Lena's minimalist penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and custom everything. It felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived since childhood. Sophie helped her unpack with enthusiastic commentary on every item. "Why do you have so many black shirts? Don't you like colors? Oh, this sweater is pretty. Can I borrow it sometime? What's this?" She held up Lena's laptop like it was an alien artifact. "That's how I work. Most of my job happens on that computer." "That's so weird. Dad's job happens with his hands and tools. Your job is invisible." It was an astute observation from a 10-year-old. Lena's empire existed primarily in code and contracts, nothing you could touch or see. Jack's work produced tangible results: cars that ran, problems solved, people helped. The contrast felt stark. That first week living together was an adjustment for everyone. Lena had forgotten what it meant to share space with other people, to navigate schedules and bathroom time and the simple logistics of coexistence. Jack worked early mornings, so Lena learned to shower the night before to avoid the 5:30 a.m. alarm. Sophie had homework that required the kitchen table, so Lena moved her laptop to the guest room. They all had different ideas about appropriate dinner times, television volume, and how much milk constituted a reasonable amount, but they learned each other's rhythms. Jack made coffee at dawn and left a cup for Lena in the thermal carafe. Sophie started knocking before entering rooms, remembering that adults sometimes needed privacy. Lena discovered she actually enjoyed cooking when it meant making dinner for people who appreciated the effort rather than eating takeout alone at her desk. The town's gossip network worked faster than Lena had anticipated. Within 3 days, everyone in Pine Ridge knew the mysterious city woman was living with Jack Miller. The reactions varied. Some people were genuinely happy for Jack. Others were protective and suspicious of outsider intentions. A few were just entertained by the drama. Mary from the diner cornered Lena during a coffee run. "So you're really doing this? Moving in, playing house, inserting yourself into Jack's life?" "I'm trying to figure out if we have a future together. That requires actually spending time together." "And if you decide you don't? If the novelty wears off and you realize small-town life isn't as charming as it seemed during your little vacation? What happens to Jack and Sophie then?" The question was fair, if uncomfortably direct. "I don't know, but I'm not going to know without trying. And Mary, I'm not playing house. I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up, but I'm here honestly trying to build something real." Mary studied her for a long moment. "I believe you. But honey, that little girl has already lost one mother. If you're going to bail, do it now before she gets more attached." "I'm not bailing." "Good, because that man deserves someone who chooses him completely, not someone who's slumming it until real life calls them back." The conversation haunted Lena for days. Was that what she was doing? Taking a sabbatical from her real life to play at domesticity before eventually returning to the world where she actually belonged. She wanted to believe her commitment was genuine, but doubt crept in during quiet moments when she checked her email and saw the empire continuing without her, barely noticing her absence. 2 weeks into her stay in Pine Ridge, Lena's CFO requested a video call. Mandatory, not optional. She took the call from the guest room, steeling herself for whatever crisis required her attention. Richard appeared on screen looking stern. "Lena, the board is concerned. You've been essentially absent for 3 weeks with minimal explanation. There are questions about your commitment to the company." "The company is running fine. Better than fine, actually. Revenue is up, the product launch went smoothly, and the team is handling everything without my constant intervention." "That's not the point. You're the CEO. Your presence matters beyond just operational oversight. Investors want to know you're fully committed." Lena felt something snap inside her chest. Committed to what exactly? To sacrificing every personal relationship for shareholder value? To working 90-hour weeks until I burn out completely? I built this company, Richard. I get to decide what commitment looks like. With respect, the board disagrees. They've asked me to deliver an ultimatum, return to full-time duties within 2 weeks, or they'll consider it voluntary resignation and begin searching for your replacement. The threat should have terrified her. 2 weeks ago, it would have sent her racing back to the city, desperate to protect her position. Now sitting in a small room with faded wallpaper while Jack's voice drifted up from the shop below and Sophie practiced piano in the next room, Lena felt something unexpected. Relief. "Tell the board I'll give them my answer in 48 hours, she said calmly. "Lena, this is serious. You could lose everything you've built. Or I could finally figure out what building the right thing actually looks like." 48 hours, Richard. I'll be in touch." She ended the call before he could respond, then sat staring at the blank screen. This was it. The moment of actual choice. Return to her empire and prove her commitment through sacrifice, or choose the life she'd found here and risk losing everything she'd spent 15 years creating. Her phone rang immediately, her assistant, probably fielding panicked calls from board members. Lena ignored it. Instead, she walked downstairs to the shop where Jack was finishing an oil change, his hands black with grease, his focus absolute. He looked up when she entered, and his smile faded at whatever he saw in her expression. "What happened?" "My board gave me an ultimatum. Return to full-time CEO duties within 2 weeks, or they'll replace me." Jack set down his tools carefully. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Tell me what you think I should do." "That's not fair. This is your decision." "But it affects you too. It affects us." Lena moved closer, needing proximity. "If I go back, we become a long-distance relationship that probably doesn't survive my work schedule. If I stay, I lose the company I built from nothing." Jack was quiet, clearly weighing his words. "What would make you happy, Lena? Not successful, not impressive, not what you think you should choose. What would actually make you happy?" The question was simple and devastating. Lena realized she'd spent so long chasing success that she'd forgotten to ask herself about happiness. Achievement had become her metric for worth, and somewhere along the way she'd confused the two completely. "Being here makes me happy," she said quietly. "You and Sophie and this ridiculously small town where everyone knows my business, working on projects I care about instead of just profitable ones, having dinner together every night, helping Sophie with homework, watching you fix things and make people's lives better through simple competence. That makes me happy." "Then stay. Choose happiness." "It's not that simple. I have responsibilities, obligations, people counting on me." "Your company will survive without you. They've already proven that. But Lena, we're just starting to build something here. If you leave now, even temporarily, I don't know if we survive the distance." Jack's voice was gentle but honest. "I can't compete with an empire. I can't offer you power or prestige or anything impressive. Just me and Sophie and a life that's small but real." "That's not small, that's everything." "Then prove it. Choose it." Before Lena could respond, Sophie's voice called from upstairs. "Dad, Lena, dinner's ready. I made spaghetti all by myself." They climbed the stairs together, and Sophie stood proudly at the stove, having prepared a meal that was slightly burned but made with complete love. She'd set the table, poured water into mismatched glasses, even attempted a salad from ingredients she'd found in the refrigerator. "What do you think?" Sophie asked nervously. "Is it okay?" "It's perfect," Lena said, her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you for cooking for us." They ate Sophie's slightly overdone spaghetti while she chattered about her day at school, the drama with her best friend, the science project that was due next week. She was completely oblivious to the tension between the adults, secure in her belief that dinner together was normal and would continue indefinitely. After Sophie went to bed, Jack and Lena sat on the couch, not touching, both lost in thought. "I'm scared," Lena admitted. "What if I give up everything I've built and then we don't work out? What if I'm terrible at this domestic life and you realize you made a mistake? What if Sophie decides she doesn't actually want me around permanently? What if none of those things happen? What if this works exactly the way we hope it will? That's almost more terrifying, because then I'll know I wasted 15 years chasing the wrong thing." Jack pulled her close, and Lena buried her face against his shoulder. "You didn't waste anything. You became someone impressive and successful. That matters. But Lena, success without happiness is just impressive suffering. You're allowed to want both. Can I have both? Can I keep some version of my career while building this life with you? I think so. It just looks different than what you planned. Maybe you're not CEO anymore. Maybe you consult or start something new or work part-time on projects that excite you. There are options between total commitment and walking away completely. He was right. She knew he was right. But letting go of the identity she'd built still felt like dying. That night, Lena lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, trying to imagine futures. In one version, she returned to her company, fought to maintain her position, proved her commitment through sacrifice. She'd visit Pine Ridge occasionally, and Jack and Sophie would become people she loved from a distance. Eventually, the distance would win, and she'd be alone again with her empire and her empty penthouse. In another version, she stepped back from her CEO role, restructured her relationship with the company she'd built, and created space for an actual life. She'd stay in Pine Ridge, build something with Jack and Sophie, and learn whether happiness was actually possible for someone who'd spent 15 years running from vulnerability. The choice should have been obvious, but fear was a powerful force, and Lena had been afraid for so long that courage felt foreign. Morning came without sleep. Lena found Jack already up, making coffee in the pre-dawn darkness. He poured her a cup without speaking, just stood beside her looking out at mountains barely visible against the lightening sky. "I'm going to do it," Lena said. "I'm going to tell them I'm stepping down as CEO." Jack's hand found hers. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." She turned to face him. "I'm going to propose becoming chairman of the board. Strategic oversight without operational responsibility. If they accept, great. If not, I'll sell my shares and start something new. Either way, I'm staying here, with you and Sophie, building whatever this becomes." "Lena, I'm terrified, Jack, absolutely terrified. But I'm more scared of looking back in another 15 years and realizing I chose success over happiness again. I'm more scared of losing you and Sophie than losing my company." Jack kissed her then, deep and certain, like she was precious and brave and exactly what he'd been hoping for. When they broke apart, the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in colors that promised new beginnings. The call to Richard happened at a reasonable hour, with Lena calm and clear about her decision. She'd step down as CEO effective immediately, transition to chairman with quarterly board meetings and strategic advisory role. If the board rejected the proposal, she'd resign completely and sell her shares within 90 days. Richard was silent for a long moment. "Lena, are you absolutely certain about this? You built this company. It's your legacy." "My legacy is going to be more than just a company. And Richard, the business will be fine. You know it will. I hired an incredible team specifically so the company didn't depend entirely on me. Let them prove it. The board won't be happy. The board will adjust. Give them my proposal. I'll wait for their response." After the call ended, Lena felt simultaneously lighter and terrified. She'd just walked away from everything she'd spent 15 years building. Or not walked away exactly, but stepped back far enough to see it clearly. Her company would survive, might even thrive without her micromanagement, and she'd finally have space for the things that actually mattered. Sophie got home from school to find Lena cooking dinner, a real meal, not just pasta from a box, actually following a recipe she'd found online. Jack was finishing up at the shop, and Sophie immediately started chattering about her day while setting the table without being asked. "Lena, can I ask you something?" Sophie said while folding napkins. "Of course." "Are you going to stay? Like really stay? Not just visit, but actually live here with us?" Lena crouched down to Sophie's eye level. "I'm going to try. I just made some big changes to my work so I could be here more. But Sophie, I need you to understand something. I'm not trying to replace your mom. I could never do that. Your mom was special, and she loved you so much." "I know. Dad tells me about her all the time." Sophie's expression was serious. "But Lena, I don't remember her. She's in pictures and stories, but she's not real to me like you are. And I think—" She paused, gathering courage. "I think it's okay to have different people who love you. It doesn't mean you forget the ones who came before." The wisdom from a 10-year-old was staggering. "You're absolutely right. And Sophie, I do love you. You and your dad both. That's why I'm staying." Sophie hugged her fiercely. Good. Because I love you too. And Dad loves you even though he gets all weird and doesn't say it out loud because adults are dumb about feelings sometimes. Despite everything, Lena laughed. Adults are pretty dumb about feelings. I know. That's why kids have to help them figure it out. Jack came upstairs then, and Sophie immediately announced, Lena's staying. She changed her work and everything. Jack's eyes found Lena's, questioning. She nodded, and his smile could have lit the entire town. The board's response came 2 days later. They'd accepted her proposal. Lena would transition to chairman, with Richard stepping up as CEO. She'd maintain significant equity and provide strategic direction quarterly, but day-to-day operations would be handled by the executive team she'd built. It was everything she'd asked for, and somehow it still felt like loss. Jack found her that evening in the garden behind the shop, staring at the email on her phone. They said yes, she told him. Everything I wanted. So why do I feel like crying? Because letting go is hard even when it's right. You built that company from nothing, Lena. It's okay to grieve the version of yourself that needed it to be everything. What if I regret this? What if I wake up in 6 months and realize I made a terrible mistake? Then we'll figure it out. But Lena, you can't live your whole life afraid of making wrong choices. Sometimes you just have to choose and commit and trust that you'll handle whatever comes. She leaned against him, letting his steady presence anchor her. I'm not good at trust. Neither am I. But we're learning together. The next few weeks were an exercise in adjustment. Lena officially stepped down as CEO in a press release that sent the business media into speculation overdrive. Profiles appeared analyzing her decision, questioning her commitment, debating whether she was stepping back or being pushed out. Lena ignored all of it, focusing instead on the life she was actively choosing to build. She started consulting with a few select clients, interesting projects that challenged her intellectually without consuming her entire existence. She helped Sophie with homework, learning that 4th grade math was indeed different and occasionally baffling. She attended town events with Jack, gradually being accepted by Pine Ridge's community as something more than just the mysterious city woman who'd temporarily captured their mechanic's attention. And slowly, she began to feel like herself again. Not the armored CEO who dominated boardrooms, but the person she'd been in college before fear and ambition had reshaped her into someone harder. She laughed more, worried less about being impressive, started measuring success by how she felt at the end of each day rather than what she'd accomplished. 3 months after moving to Pine Ridge, Lena woke up on a Saturday morning to Sophie jumping on her bed. It's Thanksgiving next week, Sophie announced. We're having dinner here, and Dad says you have to make something. He's doing the turkey, but he's terrible at sides. Lena sat up, disoriented. I don't really cook. You made that pasta thing last week that was really good. And those cookies. You can cook. You just think you can't because you never tried. Sophie bounced enthusiastically. Please, it'll be fun. We always invite people who don't have other family, so there'll be like 15 people here. Dad grills the turkey outside, and everyone brings different food, and it's the best day. After Sophie left, Jack appeared with coffee. Sorry about the ambush. Sophie gets excited about holidays. 15 people in this apartment? We push all the furniture to the walls and set up tables. It's chaotic but nice. People who'd otherwise be alone sharing a meal together. You don't have to participate if it's too overwhelming. But Lena found she wanted to participate, wanted to be part of this tradition Jack had built, wanted to contribute something meaningful to people who'd slowly become her community too. Thanksgiving arrived cold and clear, and by noon the apartment was packed with people. Mary from the diner, Marcus, the teenage mechanic Jack was training, Sophie's teacher and her elderly neighbor, and half a dozen others who'd become familiar faces around town. They brought dishes that spoke of different traditions and backgrounds, creating a feast that was chaotic and imperfect and absolutely wonderful. Lena had spent 3 days perfecting a sweet potato casserole, calling her mother for the first time in months to get the recipe from childhood. When people complimented it, she felt absurdly proud in ways that closing multi-million-dollar deals had never accomplished. After dinner, while everyone was sprawled around the apartment in food coma contentment, Jack pulled Lena aside to the now quiet garden. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For being here, for choosing this, for giving us a real chance. He took her hand, his expression serious. Lena, I know we said we'd take things slow, that we'd figure out what we are before making big decisions. But I need you to know I'm in love with you, completely. Not because you remind me of who I used to be, but because of who you are now, brave and kind and willing to risk everything for something that matters. Lena's eyes burned. I love you too, both of you, Sophie and you, this life we're building together. It's terrifying and uncertain and better than anything I planned. So we're doing this? Really doing this? Yeah, we're really doing this. Jack kissed her while the wind chimes sang overhead, and Lena felt something finally settle in her chest. This was home. Not the penthouse she'd abandoned or the childhood house she'd escaped. This small town with its two involved neighbors and its mechanic who fixed more than just cars and his daughter who'd somehow healed wounds Lena hadn't known she was carrying. Inside, someone started playing piano, Sophie showing off the piece she'd been practicing. Others joined in singing, voices blending in imperfect harmony. Through the window, Lena could see her future unfolding. Not the one she'd planned, but something infinitely better. 6 months later, Lena stood in the parking lot of Miller's Auto Repair, watching as workers installed a new sign. Miller's Auto Repair and Tech Solutions, it read, reflecting the expansion she and Jack had planned together. He'd continue fixing cars, and she'd run a small consulting business from the office they'd built onto the shop. Separate work, shared space, supporting each other's ambitions without sacrificing the life they'd built. Sophie came running from the school bus, her backpack bouncing. Did the sign come? Can I see? She studied it critically, then nodded approval. It's good. Very professional. Lena, does this mean you're officially staying forever? It means I'm staying as long as you'll have me. Forever, then. Obviously. Jack emerged from the shop, wiping his hands, and wrapped one arm around Lena and the other around Sophie. The three of them stood looking at the sign that represented their merged lives, their combined future. You know what I realized? Lena said quietly. I spent 15 years trying to prove I was good enough, building an empire to show everyone who doubted me that I could succeed. But I was measuring the wrong thing. Success isn't about how much you achieve. It's about whether you like the person you've become and the life you're living. And, Jack prompted, and I finally like both. Not because I'm impressive, but because I'm happy. Because I have people I love who love me back. Because I'm building something that matters in ways that can't be measured by stock prices. Sophie looked up at her. Does this mean you're not going to leave? I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. This is home now. Sophie hugged them both, and Lena felt the last piece of her old life finally release its hold. She'd spent 15 years running from vulnerability, convinced that success required sacrifice. She'd been wrong. Real success was standing in a small-town parking lot with grease under her fingernails and a child's arms around her waist, choosing love over empire, and finding that she'd lost nothing that actually mattered. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Jack and Lena sat on the couch like they had dozens of times before. But this time felt different, settled, certain. I want to marry you, Jack said quietly. Eventually. When you're ready. No pressure, no timeline. Just, I want you to know that's where I see this heading. Lena turned to face him fully. Ask me. What? Ask me now. I'm ready. Lena, we've only been together 6 months as adults. Don't you want more time to be sure? I've wasted 15 years already. I'm not wasting more time being cautious when I know what I want. She took his hand. Jack Miller, I love you and your incredible daughter and this life we're building together. Will you marry me? Jack laughed, surprised and delighted. That's my line. Too slow. I'm asking first, so what's your answer? Yes, obviously yes. But Lena, are you absolutely certain? I've never been more certain of anything. I don't need more time to know that this, us, Sophie, building something real together, is exactly what I want for the rest of my life. Jack pulled her close, and they stayed that way for a long time. Two people who'd found each other, lost each other, and somehow managed to find their way back against impossible odds. The wedding happened 3 months later, small and perfect, in the garden behind the shop where Lena had first confessed her fears and Jack had promised to stay. Sophie was the flower girl, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself and a smile that could have powered the sun. Mary from the diner officiated, her voice cracking with emotion as she declared them married. The entire town came to the reception, bringing food and music and the kind of genuine joy that only tight communities create. Lena danced with Jack while Sophie twirled nearby with her friends, and for the first time in her adult life, Lena felt completely whole. Later, when the celebration wound down and Sophie was asleep upstairs, and Jack and Lena were cleaning up the remnants of their wedding, Lena found herself thinking about the night her car had broken down on that dark mountain road. How terrified she'd been. How certain that her wealth and success would protect her from everything. She'd been wrong. Her money couldn't fix corroded battery terminals. Her impressive title couldn't call for help where there was no signal. Everything she'd built had been useless in that moment of genuine need. But a stranger had stopped. A man who remembered what it meant to help people without expecting anything in return. A man who'd once loved her and somehow still did, despite everything that had changed in the years between. That breakdown hadn't been a disaster. It had been salvation. Jack came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "About how my car breaking down was the best thing that ever happened to me." "Really? Because I remember you being pretty unhappy about it at the time." "I was terrified. But Jack, if that hadn't happened, I'd still be in my penthouse working 90-hour weeks and convincing myself I was happy. I'd still be alone, still be running from everything that actually mattered. Fate works in mysterious ways. Or maybe the universe knew I needed a wake-up call, something dramatic enough to break through 15 years of self-protection." She turned in his arms. "Thank you for stopping that night, for helping me even when I was too proud to accept it gracefully, for seeing past the armor to the person underneath. I'll always stop for you, no matter how many times your car breaks down." They laughed together, and Sophie called sleepily from her room asking them to keep it down. And Lena thought about how completely her life had transformed, from CEO to wife and stepmother, from penthouse to apartment above a repair shop, from measuring worth by achievements to measuring it by moments like these, ordinary, unglamorous, absolutely perfect. She'd lost her empire, or rather she'd stepped back from it, letting others run the company she'd built while she focused on building something even more valuable. A family, a home, a life that felt real instead of impressive. The business world had called her decision career suicide. Investors questioned her commitment. The media speculated about her mental health, her relationship, whether she'd been forced out despite official statements to the contrary. Lena didn't care. Let them speculate. Let them question. She knew the truth, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was walk away from what you'd built to create something better. That success without happiness was just impressive suffering. That love required vulnerability, and vulnerability required courage. And courage meant risking everything for something that actually mattered. Years later, when Sophie graduated from college with her own dreams about changing the world, Lena would think about that night on the mountain road, about how a broken-down car had led to a fixed heart, about how the man who'd rescued her from the dark had actually rescued her from herself. But that night, standing in her new home with her new husband and stepdaughter sleeping peacefully upstairs, Lena simply felt grateful. Grateful for second chances. Grateful for mountain roads and corroded battery terminals. Grateful for a man who'd remembered how to hope and a child who'd taught her how to love without fear. The empire she'd abandoned continued without her, proving that she'd built it well. But the life she'd chosen, small and simple and real, proved that she'd finally learned what actually mattered. Not power, not prestige, not wealth that impressed strangers, just love, family, belonging. The things money couldn't buy and success couldn't create. The things that required nothing except presence and courage and the willingness to choose happiness over achievement. Lena had spent 15 years becoming someone impressive. It had taken only one breakdown on a dark mountain road to remember how to become someone whole. And in the end, wholeness was worth more than any empire she could have built.